The laugh came from Mark first, quick and disbelieving, as if Nell had made a joke too dry for anyone else to catch. "You want to keep that?" he said. Through the kitchen window, the farmhouse showed its least flattering side: gray clapboards scaled with old paint, a sagging gutter, and one green shutter Hank had promised to rehang every spring for 11 years. Rain had darkened the porch roof until it looked scorched. Dana covered her mouth, but not before a laugh escaped. "Mom, come on. Even you have to admit it looks haunted." Nobody had called Nell Mom during the funeral. Now they needed her to be reasonable. Mark tapped the surveyor's card against the table. "We sell the house with 2 acres. Somebody from Richmond will buy it for the view. Then we split the road frontage into lots." "You can't cut the house off that way," Nell said. "Why not?" She looked at Hank's 3 grown children seated around the table where she had served them Thanksgiving dinner for 27 years. They thought the farmhouse was an ugly box sitting on valuable land. They did not know where it drank from, where it emptied, or how much of the surrounding ground it needed just to remain alive. "No buyer will close on what you're describing," she said. Mark smiled as if indulging an old woman who had confused reluctance with expertise. "We'll let the professionals decide that." The rain ticked against the windows. Somewhere under the kitchen floor, the pipes gave their familiar hollow knock. Nell folded her hands in her lap and said, "All right." It was not the answer any of them expected. For a moment, even Mark had nothing prepared. He had arrived with a leather folder, 3 sharpened pencils, and the determined brightness of a man who intended to manage everyone's grief before supper. Dana had brought a legal pad she had not written on. Owen sat at the far end of the table, with his tie loosened and Hank's old coffee mug between his palms, although it contained only tap water. "All right, what?" Dana asked. "Let the professionals decide." Mark leaned back. "You're agreeing to sell? I'm agreeing to find out what can be sold. That's the same thing." "No," Nell said. "It isn't." He exhaled through his nose. The sound was so much like Hank trying not to argue that it hurt more than the laugh had. The funeral flowers crowded every flat surface in the house. White lilies drooped over the sideboard, filling the room with a smell Nell had already begun to hate. Someone from church had delivered yellow chrysanthemums in a blue ceramic boot. Hank would have called it the ugliest thing God ever allowed into Virginia. His oxygen machine was still in the downstairs bedroom. Nell had unplugged it that morning, but she could hear its phantom rhythm beneath every pause. Dana glanced toward the hallway. "We're not trying to push you." Nell looked at her. "We're not," Dana insisted. "I mean, nobody expects you to be out next week." "Good. Obviously, you'll need time to go through things." His things? Dana's face changed by half an inch. Everything. There it was. Not cruelty exactly, efficiency. Nell had seen it in all 3 of them since Hank entered hospice. The way they looked at rooms and equipment and acreage as tasks waiting for the correct person to start checking boxes. Mark opened his folder. "The point is, carrying this property will eat money. Taxes, insurance, maintenance. You know that better than anybody. I do, and none of us lives close enough to keep up with it. I live here. That's not what I meant." Owen lifted his head. "It sounded like what you meant." Mark turned on him. "Then what do you suggest? We leave everything frozen in time because Dad died?" "No." "Great. We've established no." Owen rubbed his thumb over a coffee stain baked into the mug's glaze. Of the 3, he had Hank's narrow face and Nell's habit of leaving sentences unfinished when finishing them might make things worse. He worked on heating systems in Roanoke and could take apart a furnace by listening to it. But at family gatherings, he often behaved as if words were machinery he had not been trained to service. Dana reached for one of the pencils. "Could we please not do this today?" "You scheduled this today," Nell said. "I thought it would help." "It helped you." Dana put the pencil down. Nell regretted the words as soon as she saw them land, but she did not take them back. All afternoon she had accepted embraces from people who told her to call if she needed anything, though most could not look at Hank's empty recliner. She had eaten half a deviled egg because 4 women watched until she did. She had let Mark steer her by the elbow from the church to the car. Now she was tired of being moved through her own life. Owen slid Hank's mug away from himself. "Maybe we come back next weekend." "No," Nell said. "You're here. Say what you came to say." Mark's folder opened again. The will had been read 2 weeks before the funeral, because Mark pushed for it, though there had been little to surprise anyone. Nell already owned half the farm. Hank's half went equally to his children. The truck and cattle equipment were part of the shared estate. Hank had left Nell his personal possessions, an old fishing boat with no motor, and a sentence asking everyone to use common sense. The attorney had read that sentence twice. Mark began explaining the proposed sale as if Nell had not understood it the first time. The farmhouse and 2 acres would be marketed to residential buyers. The barn and back pasture might interest someone with horses. The road frontage could become 3 building parcels, maybe 4 if the county approved a narrow access strip. People are paying for land out here now, he said, not for farming, for privacy. Privacy with 4 houses lined up on the road? 4 houses on 34 acres is not exactly a subdivision. It is if you're the hayfield. Dana gave an unwilling snort. Mark ignored it. We need a survey before we know anything. I talked to a man in town who can come Thursday. You called a surveyor before the funeral? Owen asked. I made 1 phone call. You made it Tuesday. Dad was dead Tuesday. The kitchen went still. Mark stared down at the folder. His ears reddened first, just as they had when he was 19, and Hank caught him lying about a dent in the truck. Nell waited for anger, but what came out of him was smaller. I couldn't sleep, he said. I needed to do something. For 1 dangerous second, she almost reached across the table. Then he squared the papers and added, waiting doesn't make hard things easier. That was Mark's particular gift. He could offer you the soft part of himself and snatch it back before you decided what to do with it. Dana stood and carried 3 untouched glasses to the sink. She wore black trousers, a cream blouse, and gold earrings too cheerful for the day. 1 heel had sunk into the churchyard, leaving a rind of red mud along the leather. She picked at it with a thumbnail. What kind of place could you see yourself in? She asked Nell. After this, I mean. This what? The sale. We haven't had a survey. I'm just asking. A condo maybe, something with no yard, near town, so I can be closer to the grocery store, and doctors, and people. There are people here, you know what I mean. Nell did. Dana meant visible people, neighbors behind matching doors, someone across a corridor who would notice newspapers collecting, the sort of arrangement adult children imagined when they wanted the comfort of believing an older woman was supervised without personally doing the supervising. I don't want a condo, Nell said. You might if you saw one. I've seen them. Mark nodded toward the window. Anything would be easier than this. The rain had thickened, blurring the hayfield into a gray-green smear. Water poured past the broken end of the gutter and struck the metal milk can Nell used as a planter. Each drop rang faintly through the glass. This house isn't easy, she said. We know. No, you know it needs paint. Mark's jaw tightened. Here we go. Where are we going? To the part where nobody understands what you did for Dad. Nell felt heat rise under the collar of her black dress. I didn't say that. You don't have to. We know you took care of him. We appreciate it. But that doesn't mean the whole property has to become a monument. A monument? Mark, Owen warned. What? I'm saying what everybody's afraid to say. Dana turned from the sink. No, you're saying it in the way most likely to make her hate us. I don't hate you, Nell said. Mark looked almost disappointed. She stood slowly. After the hours on church pews and dining chairs, her right hip had stiffened. All 3 watched her straighten, and she despised how quickly they looked away when she caught them. Coffee? She asked. Dana blinked. What? I'm making coffee. There's ham if anybody wants a sandwich. We just ate. You move food around a paper plate. Owen's mouth twitched. That counts at funerals. It does not. Nell filled the old percolator. When she opened the tap, the faucet coughed air before releasing a thin, rusty stream. Mark glanced at it. See, he said, not unkindly. This is what I mean. Nell let the water run clear. The spring had been low since August. 2 days earlier, with the house full of relatives flushing toilets and rinsing casserole dishes, she had walked uphill in the dark to reset the pump. Owen had offered to go with her, but Mark had stopped him to ask about the estate truck. Neither remembered the interruption by morning. She spooned coffee into the basket. The 2 acres your surveyor marked on that map don't include the spring box. Mark looked at the paper. We can draw an easement. The line runs through the middle parcel. Then it runs through it. And the septic reserve is on the other side. He frowned. The septic tank is behind the house. The tank is. The approved replacement ground isn't. Approved by who? The county? When? 14 years ago. Mark pushed the map toward her. Why didn't Dad tell us any of this? He didn't think he was selling. That doesn't answer the question. It's the only answer I have. Dana returned to the table, interest overcoming annoyance. Can't those things be moved? Most things can be moved if you spend enough. How much? I don't know now. Mark gave a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. Then, how can you sit there and say no buyer will close? Because a bank won't lend on a house without permanent water and a place for its waste to go. We'll get estimates. Do that, we will. I said, all right. Again, that word unsettled him. Nell could see him trying to locate the trap, which wounded her in a place anger could not reach. She had packed his lunches when he worked summers with Hank. She had driven through sleet when Dana's first marriage ended, arriving with a thermos and never once saying she had predicted it. She had mailed Owen birthday checks even in the years he forgot hers. Still, when she agreed with them, Mark's first thought was that she must be plotting. The percolator began its wet, cheerful burble. Dana sat down and looked around the kitchen. The cabinets need updating. They hold dishes. I mean, for buyers. The buyers can bring their own cabinets. Owen laughed. It surprised all of them, including him. Even Nell smiled. For several minutes they drank coffee and ate thin ham sandwiches from funeral rolls. Mark removed his tie. Dana found a tissue and wiped the mud from her heel. The conversation wandered to the flowers, the minister's mispronunciation of Hank's middle name, and the blue ceramic boot. Dad would have shot it, Owen said. Not indoors, Nell replied. Depends how close it was to his chair. Their laughter this time was quiet and shared, and afterward the silence hurt differently. Before dusk, Mark placed a listing agreement beside Nell's hand. It was only authorization to speak with an agent and begin evaluations, he explained. No sale could occur without every owner's approval. Nell read each page while he waited. Hank had taught his children that patience was a virtue, then demonstrated almost none himself. Mark bounced his knee under the table. At the signature line, Nell paused. She looked past them toward the window. The farmhouse reflected faintly in the darkening glass. Scarred table, funeral lilies, 4 adults trying to divide grief into marketable pieces. Behind that reflection lay the pasture, the buried water line, the spring box under wet leaves, and the reserve ground no one had thought valuable because nothing stood on it. She signed. Mark collected the papers with visible relief. Thank you, Dana said. You'll see. Once we get real information, this will feel less overwhelming. Nell capped the pen. For them, perhaps it would. Outside, the rain continued working its way into every low place on the farm. Mark left first, carrying the folder beneath his coat, as if the rain might dissolve their inheritance. Dana followed after wrapping 2 ham sandwiches in foil for the drive. Owen lingered in the mudroom, turning Hank's old cap around in his hands. You taken that? Nell asked. He looked guilty. I don't know. It's a cap, Owen, not a kidney. He smiled, then set it back on the peg. I should have come more. Yes. The answer startled him. Nell opened the mudroom door. Cold rain breathed against them. Mark's headlights were already moving down the lane, too fast for the ruts. I thought you'd tell me I was busy, Owen said. You were. Or that Dad understood. He probably did, but you don't. Nell considered giving him something softer. Owen's face had always made softness easy. Even as a grown man, he carried apology in his eyebrows. That had allowed him to be the least difficult of Hank's children, without necessarily being the most helpful. I understood every time you called, she said. I also noticed every time you didn't come. He nodded. His fingers closed around the edge of the door. Drive carefully, she told him. After his taillights disappeared, she locked the door and stood in the mudroom with Hank's cap hanging beside her. The house had been crowded for 3 days. Its sudden emptiness felt less like silence than a held breath. She took down the cap, pressed its bent bill flat, and put it in the bedroom drawer with Hank's wallet and wristwatch. The surveyor arrived Thursday at 7:40 in the morning, accompanied by Mark and a young assistant whose beard was already glittering with drizzle. Mark wore hiking boots so clean, Nell suspected he had bought them the night before. The surveyor introduced himself as Russell Vane and refused coffee until Nell told him it was already made. He accepted then, black with 2 sugars, and studied Mark's proposed parcel map against the kitchen counter. This is conceptual, he said. Of course, Mark replied. Russell looked over his glasses. That means it doesn't know where anything is yet. That's why you're here. That is, in fact, why I'm here. Nell liked him immediately. He asked about existing markers, wells, drain fields, and utility routes. Mark answered the acreage questions. Nell answered everything else. Water source, spring box in the east pasture. Shared, no. Gravity feed, not enough rise. There's a pump below the cedar break. Line marked, not above ground. Russell made a note. Approximate route, I can show you. Mark shifted beside the sink. We don't need to walk every pipe today. First priority is establishing the 2-acre residential parcel. The pipe may have opinions about that, Russell said. They went outside. The rain had stopped, but the pasture grass soaked Nell's boots above the ankles. Russell's assistant carried a tripod over one shoulder. Mark attempted to step from tuft to tuft until he realized everyone could see him doing it. Nell led them past the smokehouse and through the lower gate. The farmhouse looked even rougher from that angle. The original white paint survived only beneath the eaves. A rust stain ran down from the chimney flashing, and the porch leaned just enough to make straight photographs difficult. Mark followed her gaze. Paint would change everything. Paint would change the color, you know what I mean? She did, but there was comfort in making him say only what he actually knew. At the cedar break, Nell found the flat stone she used as a marker and scraped away wet needles with her heel. Beneath it, a capped length of blue pipe emerged from the earth. Russell crouched. And the spring box? She pointed uphill. He followed the direction, then looked back toward the house. That's a run, 380 feet, give or take. Mark unfolded his copy of the map. Couldn't we grant the house access across the field? You can grant an easement, Russell said. Whether a lender likes its location is another question. Why wouldn't they? Depends what you plan to do with the bird and parcel. Sell it for a home site. Russell stood. Then you'll want to decide whether that home site has a buried water line through the middle of it. We can move the line. Nell wiped mud from the toe of her boot against the back of her calf. It took Hank and Earl Brooks 4 days to trench that one. We don't trench things with shovels now. Earl had a backhoe. Mark refolded the map with unnecessary force. They walked the proposed southern boundary. Orange flags appeared one by one, making a cheerful line through ground that had never agreed to be divided. Near the old pear tree, Russell asked about the septic system. The tank's behind the kitchen, Nell said. Field runs southwest. That stays inside the parcel. The current field does. And the reserve? She pointed beyond the nearest row of flags. Russell looked at Mark. Mark looked at Nell. How far? About 60 yards. You said the other side. You didn't say 60 yards. I didn't know you needed the distance in the kitchen. You could have been clearer. Russell's assistant became deeply interested in one leg of the tripod. The reserve ground lay on a gentle rise where the soil drained well. Hank had complained for years that the county expected him to preserve the prettiest piece of pasture for something he hoped never to need. Nell had attended the inspection because he had been delivering a calf with Earl. She remembered the health department man pressing his auger into the soil, lifting out dark red clay, and saying, "This patch. Don't compact it, don't build on it, and don't forget where it is." Hank had forgotten before supper. Nell never had. Russell paced the distance, checked the slope, and marked the location. There are ways to redraw. Mark's shoulders loosened. But 2 acres may not be realistic if you want conventional financing and clean separation from future lots. How many acres? I don't design septic systems. I establish boundaries. I'm asking for an educated guess. I'd rather give you an accurate bill. Nell turned away before Mark saw her smile. Dana arrived near noon in a silver sedan, with one muddy heel still riding in a grocery bag on the passenger floor. She brought salads in clear plastic bowls and a box of iced tea. I thought we'd eat healthy, she said. Russell had already left. Mark was at the kitchen table transferring measurements to his conceptual map, as if enough pencil could change the land. We may need 4 acres, he told her. For the house? Maybe 5. Everybody's being extremely conservative. Nell took forks from the drawer. Dana stared through the window. Does that affect the road lots? It affects 1. Maybe. How much? We don't know yet. You said the survey would tell us. It will. But it didn't. It's been 4 hours, Dana. Nell placed 3 forks on the table. There are paper plates left. Mark glared at her. You seem awfully pleased. I'm pleased not to wash dishes. Dana sat down and opened her salad. She had chosen one with grilled chicken, dried cranberries, pecans, cheese, and enough dressing to drown anything healthy inside it. "There's no reason for this to turn ugly," she said. "It isn't ugly," Nell replied. "It's wet." Mark shoved the map aside. "You told us no buyer would close. Now, every time we encounter a normal complication, you act like it proves you're right." I walked Russell to the spring. Yes, with commentary. He asked questions. You enjoyed answering them. That was true enough to silence her. Dana stabbed a piece of chicken. "The agent's coming tomorrow. Can we agree to hear what she says before deciding it's impossible?" "I've agreed all week. You have a particular way of agreeing. What way is that?" "Like a person handing someone enough rope." Nell peeled the lid from her salad. "Then don't tie it around your neck." Mark pushed away from the table. His chair legs barked against the floor. Dana looked at Nell with reluctant admiration. "That was mean." "Yes." "A little funny." "Yes." The agent arrived the next afternoon wearing red rubber boots and carrying a laser measurer. Claire Donnelly was in her early 50s, brisk without being breathless, with silver threaded through dark curls. She complimented the original heart pine floors, frowned at the upstairs bathroom, and pressed 2 fingers into the soft wood beneath the porch rail. Mark trailed her, supplying visions. "This wall could come out." "Possibly," Claire said. "Open concept. If the buyers dislike walls, the barn would make an incredible event space. If the buyers enjoy permits." Dana caught Nell's eye, then looked away before the shared amusement became an alliance. Claire spent nearly 2 hours at the farm. She asked Nell how often the spring ran low, when the septic tank had last been pumped, whether the oil tank had ever leaked, and which windows opened without persuasion. She did not act shocked by the answers. At the kitchen table, she reviewed recent sales. Restored farmhouses photographed beautifully, but often sat longer than new construction. Buyers who wanted acreage usually wanted usable barns, reliable internet, and enough charm to forgive expensive repairs. "This has charm," Claire said. "It also has a roof near the end of its life." Mark crossed his arms. "The roof doesn't leak." Claire glanced at the brown stain above the pantry door. "Not every time it rains," Nell said. "Nell?" Mark muttered. Claire wrote something on her pad. "I can sell defects I know about. Surprises are harder." Dana asked for a suggested price. Claire named a figure for the farmhouse with 5 acres, subject to survey and verification of water and septic access. It was less than Mark wanted and more than Nell expected. Mark leaned forward. "And the remaining acreage? I wouldn't market the other parcels until the house boundaries are settled. We could list simultaneously. You could also juggle knives simultaneously. The question is whether that improves lunch." Nell decided she liked Claire too. By Sunday, Dana had scheduled a photographer. Mark arrived with a pressure washer, borrowed from someone in Charlottesville, and stripped a long, pale scar into the porch before Claire made him stop. Owen came carrying a toolbox, a new wax ring for the upstairs toilet, and an apology disguised as a question. "Anything else leaking?" "Depends how long you're staying," Nell said. He stayed until dark. They worked around one another with the uneasy politeness of strangers assigned the same kitchen. Dana cleared magnets from the refrigerator and removed the crocheted cover from the toaster. Mark hauled broken fence posts away from the barn. Owen repaired the toilet and rehung the green shutter, which turned out to have swollen beyond its frame. Nell boxed photographs. Claire had not ordered her to remove them all. She had only suggested reducing personal items so buyers could imagine themselves in the rooms. Dana interpreted that as permission to strip every surface. Hank vanished into newspaper-lined boxes. Hank holding a base at Clater Lake, Hank asleep with his boots on. Hank and Nell beside the pear tree on their 20th anniversary. She labeled each box "bedroom" because she could not bring herself to write his name. The photographer arrived near sunset, when warm light softened the siding and turned the wet fields gold. He stood at the end of the lane and angled his camera until the unpainted side of the house disappeared behind the maple. On the screen, the farmhouse looked dignified, lonely, and almost grand. Mark stared at the image. "See? That's what I've been saying." Nell looked from the glowing photograph to the real porch, where his pressure washer had left one raw stripe across a century of weather. 3 days after the listing went live, Claire called during supper. A retired couple from Richmond had seen the photographs. They wanted a farmhouse, room for a garden, and enough quiet to hear rain on the roof. They were pre-approved, Claire said, and eager to visit Saturday. Mark called less than 5 minutes later. "You see," he said, "there's always a buyer." Nell held the telephone away from the knocking kitchen pipe and watched cloudy water clear in the glass beneath the faucet. "There's always a person who wants the picture," she said. Mark sighed. "Could you try not to ruin this before they arrive?" Nell shut off the tap. "I'll make coffee," she told him. The coffee was ready at 9:30. By 10, Mark had called twice to ask whether Nell had opened the curtains and once to remind her not to discuss the septic system unless someone asked. At 10:15, Claire came through the mudroom carrying a bundle of grocery store tulips. "Put those on the table," she said. "Then go enjoy your morning. My morning is here. The buyers need room to imagine the house without you in it. I don't take up much room. You take up all of it, Nell. It's your house." There was no insult in Claire's voice, which made the request harder to resist. Nell found a pitcher for the flowers. Dana had removed the blue ceramic boot along with every other object she considered visually confusing. The kitchen now held 3 wooden spoons, 1 white dish towel, and a bowl of lemons no one in the family remembered buying. "Where am I supposed to go?" Nell asked. "Lunch? It's 10:15. Brunch." "I ate breakfast." Claire studied her. "Do you have a friend you can visit?" "I have several." "Good. Visit the least observant one so you can come back early." Nell was putting on her coat when tires crunched along the lane. A dark blue station wagon pulled up beside Claire's car. "They're early," Claire said. "Then, I suppose they'll have to imagine around me." Paul and Marjorie Keene entered apologizing. They had driven from Richmond before sunrise, stopped for gas outside Charlottesville, and somehow made every light between there and the farm. Paul was a tall man with a white mustache and the careful knees of someone who had climbed too many ladders. Marjorie wore a red wool coat and paused in the mudroom to admire the row of worn hooks. "Those original?" she asked. "Original to somebody," Nell said. "They were here before me." Marjorie smiled. Best kind of answer. Claire gave Nell a look that meant, "Please behave." Nell took off her coat. The Keenes did not sweep through the house, proclaiming what they would change. They opened closets, asked before touching windows, and stood quietly in the front room, while the maple branches moved shadows over the floor. Paul tapped the plaster beside the chimney and asked if it had ever been wet. "Yes," Nell said. Claire cleared her throat. "Flashing was repaired 9 years ago," Nell continued. That patch held. "The pantry door gets water when the wind comes from the southwest." Paul nodded as if weather having a direction pleased him. Marjorie walked into the downstairs bedroom and stopped. The oxygen machine had been collected by the medical supplier, but its wheels had left faint grooves in the rug. Hank's recliner remained near the window. Nell had draped a clean quilt over it. "What a lovely room," Marjorie said. "It gets the morning sun. Was this a parlor? Long ago." Marjorie looked at the recliner, then at Nell. She did not ask. Upstairs, Paul tested the railing with his weight. Claire discussed bedroom dimensions. Marjorie wanted to know whether the attic stayed dry and if the pear tree produced fruit. Nell answered both questions honestly. Mostly, and too much. When they returned to the kitchen, Marjorie picked up one of the lemons. "Real," she said. I was surprised too. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Paul laughed. "Our agent staged our last place with wooden pears. 8 of them in a bowl. We lived there 11 years and never owned a pear." "You have to watch fruit," Nell said. "It gets ideas." Claire gave up and poured coffee. Mark arrived 20 minutes later in his clean hiking boots. He claimed he had been passing through, though his house was more than an hour east, and there was nowhere nearby for him to pass through on the way to anything. He launched into an explanation of the acreage, road frontage, and possible barn uses before learning the Keenes' names. Paul listened politely. Marjorie's gaze drifted toward the window. "Would the garden be somewhere behind the house?" she asked Nell. "Depends what you want to grow. Vegetables, flowers, if the deer allow it. The deer don't allow much. There's decent sun beyond the smokehouse, but you'd need fencing. I like that little rise. That's reserve ground." Mark's head turned. "For the septic?" Nell added. Claire set down her coffee cup. "The proposed parcel configuration is still being evaluated." Paul's mustache dipped. "The septic field isn't on the property?" "The current field is," Mark said quickly. "We're talking about a future contingency that may never be relevant." "How old is the system?" Paul asked. Nell told him. Mark stepped between her and the table map. "Everything will be disclosed in the property documents, obviously." Paul's expression did not change, but the rooms did. Marjorie put the lemon back in the bowl. Could we walk to the barn? Outside, Claire caught Nell by the elbow. Not a word, she whispered. He asked. I know he asked. Let Mark answer the next one. That seems unkind to the buyer. I meant, let me answer. Oh. Claire squeezed once, then released her. The barn smelled of old hay, dry manure, and the faint mineral odor of rain coming through rusted metal. Paul inspected the posts. Marjorie stood in the center aisle, looking through the open rear doors toward the pasture. It feels like a place that remembers what it was for, she said. Mark spoke about wedding rentals. Nell watched Marjorie's face close politely. After they left, Mark rounded on her before their station wagon reached the road. What was that? A showing. You practically told them the toilets are on a timer. I told them where the reserve field is. They didn't ask where it was. They asked about the garden. So, suggest another spot. There is another spot. Behind the smokehouse. You could have stopped there. Claire collected the coffee cups. They liked the house. Mark turned to her. Did they? They stayed an hour and 40 minutes, because Nell gave them a complete agricultural history. They also liked Nell. That silenced him more effectively than defending her would have. Claire called that evening. The Keens intended to make an offer after reviewing the survey information. They wanted 5 acres, the barn included, and written assurance that their water and septic needs would remain entirely within what they purchased. That's more land than the listing, Mark said over the speakerphone. The listing says acreage subject to final survey, Claire replied. 5 acres takes most of the eastern frontage. It takes the spring. It doesn't need to take the spring. It needs an easement to the spring. The Keens don't want their primary water source on somebody else's future building lot. Buyers always start by asking for more. Nell sat at the table, twisting the telephone cord around one finger. The lemons glowed beneath the overhead light. What are they offering? Dana asked. Claire named a number only slightly below the asking price. Dana inhaled. Mark stopped objecting to the acreage quite so loudly. Their written offer arrived the next morning, contingent on financing, inspection, water testing, septic review, and an acceptable final boundary. Mark described the conditions as routine. Dana drove out to sign in person, bringing a bakery box filled with elaborate cupcakes none of them wanted. Owen signed electronically from Roanoke. Nell read all 9 pages. You're not going to object to the barn? Mark asked. No. The number? No. The closing date? No. Dana licked frosting from her thumb. Could we not interrogate her when she's cooperating? I'm checking. You're waiting for a trap. Nell looked up. Mark's mouth tightened. Are you signing or not? She signed. The inspection took most of a Tuesday. Paul came alone, wearing work boots and carrying a thermos. He followed the inspector through the crawl space and climbed into the attic despite his knees. Nell stayed in the kitchen because Claire had told Mark it was her legal right to remain in her own home, a statement Claire delivered while looking directly at him. The inspector found what Nell expected. Aging roof shingles, 2 outlets without grounds, moisture near the pantry door, a weak porch joist, and evidence that mice considered the attic a seasonal resort. Paul returned from the crawl space with cobwebs in his mustache. You knew about the sill under the porch? He asked. I knew it was soft, not how far. Could have been worse. It can always be worse. He poured coffee from his thermos and offered her the cup first. The water test came back acceptable. The septic tank was pumped and inspected. The current field still functioned, though the contractor warned that replacement would eventually be necessary. Paul and Marjorie requested a repair credit rather than demanding new work. Mark called it proof that Nell had exaggerated every problem. They haven't approved the boundary, she reminded him. They're not buying dirt, they're buying a house. The house uses dirt. Everything with you is a proverb. Owen came the following weekend to replace the porch joist. He crawled beneath the boards while Nell passed him tools through the gap. Mark says we'll close by the end of next month, he said. Mark says many things when he wants them to become true. Owen grunted as he shifted the new lumber. Do you want it to fail? The question stopped her hand over the toolbox. No. You want to leave? No. Those can't both be true. Nell selected the 1/2-inch wrench and placed it beside his fingers. They can if wanting isn't the only thing that matters. He slid farther under the porch. That sounds miserable. It has been. The lender ordered its own appraisal and survey review. Russell revised the proposed house parcel to include 5 acres, the reserve ground, and a narrow strip reaching toward the spring. Mark rejected the shape because it cut diagonally across the best remaining road parcel. He drew a cleaner boundary and proposed a permanent water easement instead. Emails multiplied. Claire printed them for Nell because Mark had begun sending long messages after midnight. The Keens wanted ownership of the spring or a dedicated well. A well contractor said a drilled well might cost between $18,000 and $30,000, depending on depth, with no guarantee of flow. Mark called the estimate absurd. Dana asked if the cost could be deducted from the sale. Mark said that rewarded unreasonable buyers. Nell placed the printed emails in a kitchen drawer beneath Hank's old takeout menus. 2 weeks before the proposed closing, Claire arrived without tulips. She stood in the mudroom but did not remove her coat. "The lender won't approve the parcel as drawn," she said. Mark, who had driven out for the call, stared at her. "Which drawing?" "Yours. They have permanent access. They have access to a spring on land intended for separate residential development. The appraiser flagged the arrangement, and underwriting won't accept it. Then we use Russell's version. The Keens will, if the reserved ground and spring are included." Mark looked at the map spread across the table. The revised boundary ran through the road frontage he had valued most highly. "No," he said. "There has to be another solution." Claire removed her gloves one finger at a time. "There may be," she said, "but there isn't one that closes Friday." Friday remained on the calendar for 3 more days, though nobody spoke of it as a closing date again. Mark spent those days attempting to negotiate with people who had no reason to be persuaded. He called Claire, Russell, the well contractor, the Keens' agent, and someone at the lender who would confirm only that the proposed property needed an independent, reliable water supply. By Monday evening, he had produced 6 new parcel drawings and 1 headache severe enough to make him turn off the kitchen lights. Nell sat with him in the dim room while he pressed his thumbs against his temples. "You have aspirin?" he asked. "Bathroom cabinet. Upstairs? There's one downstairs." He opened the wrong cabinet first, then the next. 27 years of visiting, and he did not know where she kept medicine. Nell pointed toward the hall, above the towels. He returned with 2 tablets and swallowed them without water. "Russell's drawing gives them everything they need," she said, "and takes 160 feet of road frontage from the remaining land. They're paying for 5 acres. They're paying for a house. The acreage is incidental, not to the spring." Mark pulled one of his maps closer. The lines had begun to overlap, blue ink over red pencil over the surveyor's clean black measurements. "If we drill a well beside the house, none of this matters. The contractor can't do it before Friday. I know that. He can't promise water. I know. And you don't want to pay for it." His hand flattened over the map. "Do you enjoy this?" "No. You don't look upset." Nell considered that. She had spent the afternoon in Hank's room sorting his shirts into piles. Keep, give away, rags. Every shirt had required a decision. Perhaps there was only so much visible distress a person could produce in one day. "I'm tired," she said. "You were tired before we started. I was tired before Hank died." Mark stared at the table. For once, he had no fast reply. In the darkened window, Nell could see them both reflected beneath the hanging lamp, Mark broad through the shoulders, his hair more gray than Hank's had been at the same age. Nell smaller than she remembered herself, black dress replaced by an old green cardigan, her face pale in the glass. "I didn't mean for this to get complicated," he said. "It was already complicated." "Why didn't you and Dad fix it? We fixed what stopped working. That isn't the same as planning." "No," Nell said. "Planning is cleaner." He looked as if he might accuse her of another proverb, but the fight had gone out of him. He folded the maps, took 3 aspirin from the bottle for later, and left without asking. The Keens withdrew Wednesday morning. Claire delivered the news over the telephone with such care that Nell found herself comforting her. "They liked you," Claire said. "They wanted water. They wanted the house too. Most people do enjoy water in a house." A breath that might have become a laugh stopped halfway. "They've already paid for inspections. Paul said they can't keep spending money while the boundaries change. They're right. Mark won't think so. Mark thinks right is a vote he can recount." This time Claire did laugh, though softly. The termination papers arrived by email. Owen signed first. Dana waited until evening. Mark called for a family conference before he would release the Keens' deposit, even after Claire explained that the financing contingency left no reasonable grounds to hold it. Nell disliked the phrase family conference. It made the conversation sound warmer than it was. They gathered by speakerphone. Mark sat at Nell's table. Dana joined from her parked car, rain thudding against its roof. Owen called from a job site, where a compressor started every few minutes and drowned out half his sentences. "We have two options," Mark said. "Include the spring and lose a road lot, or invest in a well and keep the original layout. Third option," Dana said, "sell the whole thing together, at a discount, at what the whole thing is worth. That is the definition of a discount." Nell stirred soup on the stove. Nobody had asked her to cook, but Mark had arrived at 5 and would otherwise stay until 9, consuming only coffee and grievance. Owen's voice crackled through the phone. "What did Russell say about shifting the lot north? It ruins the barn parcel. Does it ruin it, or does it make it smaller? It reduces the value, so smaller." Mark pinched the bridge of his nose. "Can we focus on the termination?" "There's nothing to focus on," Nell said. "Let them go. They made an offer on a parcel we couldn't give them. We could give it to them. We'd be choosing not to." "Then say that." Dana went quiet in the car. Owen's compressor stopped. Mark looked across the table. "You think this is my fault. I think you want the house sold without letting it take up the ground it uses. That sounds good because you've practiced it." "No, it sounds good because it's true." He signed the release. Paul and Marjorie returned Saturday to collect a ladder Paul had left beside the barn. They could have asked Claire to arrange it, but Marjorie called Nell directly. "We'd like to say goodbye to the place," she said, "if that isn't strange." "It's strange," Nell replied. "Come anyway." They brought cinnamon bread. Nell made coffee, and the three of them sat at the unstaged kitchen table. Dana's lemons had gone soft. Nell had thrown 2 away and cut the least damaged one into slices for water. Paul looked toward the pantry stain. "I got an estimate for the roof. Did it frighten you?" "Only Marjorie." "I was already frightened," Marjorie said. The estimate gave the fear a number. They smiled, but the disappointment between them was real. Nell had expected their withdrawal to feel like escape. Instead, she kept noticing ways they might have fit. Paul would have repaired the porch correctly. Marjorie would have planted flowers the deer ate, and then complained as though betrayed by personal friends. They would have changed the cabinets eventually, but perhaps the house would have forgiven them. "We weren't trying to take it from you," Marjorie said. "I know. When we met you, I wondered if you wanted us to hate it." Nell turned her coffee cup between her palms. "I wanted you to know it. That worked. We liked it anyway." Paul cleared his throat. "We could have handled the repairs. What we couldn't handle was buying 5 acres and depending on land that might belong to 3 different people next year. You shouldn't have to." The son didn't agree. "Mark." "Mark," Paul repeated, with the tone of someone memorizing a caution sign. "He said the water arrangement was common out here." "It is common. He said you'd make sure it kept working." Nell stopped turning the cup. Marjorie watched her face. "You didn't know he told us that." "No, he made it sound as if you would remain responsible for the pump. Just informally." "Because you knew the system." Paul's mustache pulled down. "That was when we decided we were done." Heat crept into Nell's neck. Mark had offered her labor with the land, a permanent invisible fixture, like the buried blue pipe. "I'm sorry," she said. "You didn't do it?" "No. I'm sorry you were put in that position." Marjorie reached across the table and touched 2 fingers to Nell's wrist. It was a light gesture, easily withdrawn. Nell let it stay. After they left, she walked to the spring. Orange survey flags trembled along the field, wet from morning rain. Several had been trampled by cattle nosing through the fence from the adjoining pasture. Nell followed the cedar brake uphill until she found Lila Brooks kneeling beside a loose bottom wire, working it back around a post with pliers. Lila wore brown coveralls and a purple scarf tied over her hair. At 59, she had her father Earl's square hands and none of his patience for foolishness. "You selling me a corner?" she asked, nodding at the flags. "I'll throw it in with the fence." "Fence isn't worth what you're charging." Lila twisted the wire tight and stood. She had brought soup twice a week during Hank's last month, never stayed longer than 10 minutes, and never asked Nell to describe how she was holding up. "I saw cars," she said. "Thought maybe you got buyers. Had some. Lost them. They escaped." Lila looked toward the farmhouse. Smart couple. They were. That answer earned Nell a sideways glance. She told Lila about the parcel, the spring, and Mark's assurance that Nell would keep the pump working after a sale. Lila listened without interruption, pulling damp weeds away from the fence line. When Nell finished, Lila said, "He volunteered to come reset it in February. He lives an hour away. Pumps respect distance. Always have." Lila snipped a length of old wire. "You want to sell?" Nell looked downhill. From the spring, the house appeared to rest in the palm of the pasture. The roof needed replacing. One shutter was newly green against gray boards. The photographer's flattering angle could not be found from there. "I want Hank's children to stop looking at me like I'm the problem standing between them and their money. That wasn't what I asked?" "No." Lila waited. Nell rubbed her thumb against a patch of mud on her palm. "I don't know what I want, if keeping it means fighting them. That's closer." When Nell returned, Mark's car was parked beside the porch. He stood in the kitchen holding the cardboard box labeled bedroom. The lid was open. Hank's photographs lay exposed on the table. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Looking for the property tax bills." "In my desk. I know that now." He lifted the photograph of Hank beside the pear tree. "Claire says the Keens came by. They forgot a ladder. And stayed 2 hours? We had coffee." Mark put down the photograph. "Did you tell them not to buy?" They had already withdrawn. "That isn't an answer." Nell removed her wet coat. "They told me you promised I'd maintain their water system. I said you knew how it worked. You said I'd make sure it kept working. I was trying to reassure them. With my time, it would have been one pump. You'll still own land here. And where would I live?" Mark's eyes shifted just once toward the unstaged room. In town, presumably. "Presumably. You've maintained the system for years, for my home. It could have saved the sale." There it was, plain enough that neither could pretend to misunderstand. Nell walked to the table and returned Hank's photographs to the box one at a time. Fishing lake, pear tree, sleeping in boots. Mark remained where he was. "You keep saying we," she said. "We'll sell, we'll divide, we'll solve it. But every time your plan needs somebody to lose land, labor, or a home, you mean me. That isn't fair. It is exact." He closed the folder against his chest. "Claire thinks we should pause the listing." "Then pause it. I'm replacing her." Nell looked up. "She's too cautious," he said. "I found someone who specializes in distressed rural property." Distressed. That's a sales category, not an insult. Of course. The new agent came Monday with paint samples. Colleen Price was blonde, energetic, and spoke of the farmhouse's deficiencies as opportunities to create emotional distance. Buyers, she explained, needed freshness, consistency, a neutral story. She spread 6 gray cards across Nell's kitchen table. "This one photographs young," she said, tapping the color of wet cement. "We'll start with the cabinets." Nell picked up the card. The color was named Morning Fog, though she had never seen a morning produce anything so lifeless. "My cabinets are wood," she said. "Wood-colored," Colleen corrected. "There's a difference. They're made of maple, and they're lovely quality. Paint will unify the room." "With what?" Colleen smiled as if Nell had handed her an opening. "With the buyer's future." Mark stood behind the agent, arms folded, avoiding Nell's eyes. Dana had joined by video call on his telephone. Her face hovered above the sugar bowl. "It's just paint," Dana said through the speaker. "Then why does it cost $1,800? "That includes the walls," Colleen said. "And labor." Nell turned over the estimate. "Not the insides. Buyers don't need the insides painted, so even the cabinets get to keep something to themselves." Colleen laughed brightly. Mark did not. Nell looked around the kitchen. The maple doors had darkened near the handles. Hank once attempted to refinish a drawer and abandoned the job after sanding it to a different color from everything around it. That drawer was not beautiful, but Nell knew which one stuck in August and which hinge required lifting before it closed. Paint would not change those facts. Paint would only make the cabinets easier to misunderstand. "What happens if I say no?" she asked. Mark stepped forward. "Why would you? I'm curious. We're trying to sell a house that failed to sell. The house didn't fail." Dana's voice crackled. "Could we please not argue over vocabulary?" Nell waited. Mark glanced at Colleen. The agent's smile remained fixed, but she had begun rearranging her paint cards into a perfect fan. "Nothing happens if you say no," he said. "We can't force you to improve the property." "Improve!" Nell set Morning Fog back on the table. "Paint them," she said. The painters arrived Wednesday and removed the doors first. By noon, the kitchen looked toothless. Every bowl, saucepan, and chipped mug stood exposed on the shelves, while men in white coveralls sanded away the surfaces Hank's family had touched for decades. Nell stayed until the chemical smell made her eyes water. Colleen had suggested a hotel for 2 nights. Mark had suggested Dana's spare room, forgetting that Dana lived 2 hours away and had already converted that room into an office. Nell drove instead to B. Larkin's apartment in town. B opened the door, wearing purple slippers and holding a fly swatter. "You a fly?" she asked. "Not today." "Then come in." B had been widowed 9 months. She had responded to loss by buying a yellow sofa her husband Ray would have hated and taking up jigsaw puzzles depicting Italian villages she had no intention of visiting. The current puzzle occupied the dining table, forcing them to eat tomato soup from trays in the living room. "They're painting maple?" B asked. "Gray. On purpose? Apparently young people can't imagine living around brown." B dipped half a grilled cheese sandwich into her soup. "What color are the trees supposed to be? They'll paint those after the cabinets. Costs extra." Nell smiled. The apartment was warm and overfull. B had framed photographs on every wall, including several in which Ray was chewing. Nothing had been put away for an imaginary buyer. "You can stay here as long as you want," B said. "The paint dries tomorrow." "That wasn't what I meant." Nell pretended to concentrate on her soup. B did not repeat herself. That was one reason Nell trusted her. When Nell returned the following afternoon, the cabinets were smooth, gray, and professionally young. The walls had become a paler gray called whispering ash. Against them, the funeral lilies looked yellowed and diseased. Dana stood on a stepladder, taking down the curtains. "I thought you were working," Nell said. "I moved some calls." "Why?" "The pattern fights with the walls." "I meant, why are you here?" Dana folded the curtain across one arm. "Colleen said the photographer can come again tomorrow. Mark can remove curtains." "Mark removes things with a crowbar." This was true. Nell set her overnight bag by the table. The blue ceramic boot had reappeared from wherever Dana had hidden it, and now sat near a box marked "Donate." Nell lifted it out. "You hate that," Dana said. Hank hated it. He hated most decorations. He liked Christmas lights. He liked leaving them up until March. They folded the second curtain together. Without fabric around it, the window looked taller and colder. Dana kept glancing at her telephone where it lay face down on the counter. "Are you waiting for a call?" Nell asked. "No." The telephone buzzed. Dana ignored it until it stopped, then pushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Carl's disputing the value of the house." "Your house." "Our house, technically. He says the renovations didn't add what we spent." "Do you think they did?" "I think we spent it." Nell placed the folded curtain in a box. Dana sat on the lowest step of the ladder. "He wants to keep it and pay me out, based on an appraisal his friend arranged. That sounds convenient. He says if I fight him, the lawyers will consume the difference." "What does your lawyer say?" "That lawyers consuming the difference is a real possibility." The telephone buzzed again. Dana turned it over, but did not answer. Nell had never liked Carl. She also knew Dana disliked sympathy when it arrived before she had decided she deserved it. "Do you need money?" Nell asked. Dana's eyes moved to the newly painted cabinets. "Everybody needs money. That is not an answer." "No," Dana said. "I don't need you to give me money. I didn't offer. That sounded mean." "Yes." Dana's mouth bent despite herself. Then the humor passed. "I need this not to take a year," she said. "I need one part of my life to finish without somebody making me prove what I contributed." The sentence settled between them. Nell ran her hand along the bare curtain rod. Dana stared at the floor, perhaps hearing what she had said, perhaps refusing to. "I'm not Carl," Nell said. "I know." "Do you?" Dana stood and carried the ladder into the hall. Colleen scheduled an open house for Sunday. She replaced Nell's coffee with a vanilla wax warmer because, she explained, caffeine smelled busy while vanilla smelled welcoming. She put white covers over the recliner and sofa, brought back the bowl of lemons, and placed a rolled towel in the upstairs bathroom that no one was permitted to use. At 10 minutes before noon, she handed Nell a brochure for the public gardens in town. "I've seen them," Nell said. "See them again. It's February. Then you'll have privacy." Nell drove to Lila's instead. Lila lived in a low brick house across the adjoining pasture. Her kitchen held seed catalogs, muddy gloves, and a radio giving weather updates to nobody listening. A woman Nell knew slightly, Camille Reese, sat at the table entering orders into a laptop. Everyone called her Cam. She managed the business side of the cut flower operation she and Lila had been building on leased ground. Cam raised her coffee cup. "We hear you're too old-fashioned for your kitchen." "Only on the outside." Lila snorted and handed Nell a mug. From the window, Nell could see cars turning into her lane. Colleen had tied balloons to the mailbox, pale gold things that twisted violently in the wind. "Looks like a dentist's opening," Lila said. "Maybe they'll pull the house." Cam closed the laptop halfway. "You really selling?" "I'm really letting them try." "That sounds different," Cam said. "It is." Lila leaned against the counter. "You tell them about the spring?" Nell gave her a look. "All right." "Foolish question." A pickup stopped near the barn. A man in a tan coat got out and photographed the roof without entering the house. Two women arrived in a red car and walked the pasture in shoes meant for sidewalks. A gray sport utility vehicle remained almost an hour. Nell watched from Lila's kitchen until she could no longer tell whether she was hoping someone would love the house or expose the gray cabinets as a fraud. Colleen called at 4:30. 16 groups, she announced. Excellent traffic. 2 serious prospects and 1 investor. Did anybody use the rolled towel? There was a pause. I put out fresh hand towels. So there were 2 towels. I'll explain when you get back. The serious prospects requested information packets but made no immediate offers. The investor did. His name was Grant Coulter, and he bought rural land for a company that built what Colleen called estate homes. His proposal covered all 34 acres, including the farmhouse and barn, with cash closing in 30 days. The amount was well below the combined figures Mark had imagined, but high enough to make Dana stop objecting when he insisted on an emergency meeting. They gathered in the gray kitchen beneath the smell of artificial vanilla. Owen drove in from Roanoke. Colleen presented the offer and a folder of comparable land sales. "He doesn't care about the water arrangement," she said. "He's buying the whole property." "What happens to the house?" Nell asked. Colleen's pause was brief but noticeable. "The offer is for land and improvements as is." "That isn't what I asked. Grant intended to evaluate whether the farmhouse could be renovated," she explained. "The company had no obligation to preserve any structure." "He'll tear it down," Owen said. Mark turned a page. "Maybe." "He'll tear down the barn too," Owen said. "Probably," Colleen admitted. Dana studied the number. "How firm is he?" "It's his opening offer." "He's testing whether we're desperate," Mark said. "Are we?" Nell asked. "No." Dana's telephone buzzed against the table. She silenced it. Mark pointed to the comparable sales. "These are raw land. We have a habitable house, utilities, road access, agricultural buildings." "You called it a distressed rural property last week," Nell said. "That's marketing language. Apparently language changes value depending on who needs it to." Mark ignored her. "Counter 25% higher." "He may walk," Colleen said. "Then he walks." Dana looked at Mark. "It's cash. No lender, no spring problem, no septic contingency. And it's too low. It's lower than your fantasy. It is lower than fair market value." "You don't know fair market value. That's the entire reason we're doing this." Owen rubbed his palms together. "What does Nell want?" The room quieted with surprising speed. Nell looked around the kitchen. Mark's plan had made neutral. The cabinets no longer seemed like hers, but the room beneath them still did. Through the uncovered window, the pasture lay blue in the winter dusk. She did not want Grant Coulter to scrape away the farmhouse. She also did not want to use sentiment as a chain around 3 people who owned part of it. Wanting, she had told Owen, was not the only thing that mattered. "The offer is too low," she said. "If he pays an honest whole farm price, I'll consider it." Mark looked almost offended that she had agreed with him. Dana leaned back. "What is an honest price? Not one we invent at this table." Colleen gathered her comparable sheets. "I can recommend an independent whole property appraisal." "Do it," Nell said. Mark's mouth tightened. "We can counter first." "No," Dana said. "We get the appraisal." Owen nodded. For the first time since Hank died, Mark found himself outnumbered without Nell having raised her voice. He closed the offer folder. Outside, one of Colleen's balloons broke loose from the mailbox and lifted over the dark field, its ribbon writhing beneath it until the wind carried it out of sight. The appraiser spent less time admiring the gray cabinets than Colleen hoped. He measured the house, photographed the barn, walked the road frontage, and asked for records on the spring and septic system. Mark followed him across the property until the man finally turned and said he worked more accurately without an audience. His report arrived 8 days later. $478,000 for the farm as one intact property, as is. Mark read the number twice. That can't be right. Dana was seated across from him with her telephone beside her plate. It's $43,000 more than Coulter offered. It's at least $100,000 below what the parcels are worth separately. Parcels we don't have. We could have them. Nell sat near the window, mending the cuff of her green cardigan. The family had gathered over meatloaf because arguments lasted longer when nobody ate. Owen had driven in after work and looked tired enough to sleep against the refrigerator. Colleen opened the appraisal to the land comparison section. The number accounts for the house's condition and the fact that subdivision would require further surveying, soil work, and approvals. Coulter knows how to do all that, Mark said. He also knows it costs money. That's his business. And buying low is part of it. Mark stood and carried his plate to the counter, though he had eaten only 2 bites. Counter at $470. Dana shook her head. He'll never pay full appraisal. Then $465. He offered $435 after you pushed him, which proves he has room. It proves you've already gotten $43,000 out of him. Mark turned. Why are you so eager to hand him the rest? I'm eager to finish something. Your divorce is not a reason to give away Dad's property. Dana went still. Nell's needle stopped above the cuff. Owen looked down at his plate. Mark realized what he had said, but pride arrived before apology. I mean, we need to separate the issues. You brought up my divorce, Dana said, because it's affecting your judgment. My judgment is that $435,000 in cash is a real offer. Your judgment is that 5 imaginary parcels are money already sitting in a bank. They aren't imaginary. They're orange flags. Dana, Owen said. She stood so quickly her chair tipped backward. Owen caught it before it hit the floor. I have spent 3 months listening to a man explain why everything I helped build belongs more to him than to me, she said. I will not sit here while you explain that my need to be done is some kind of female confusion. I didn't say female. You rarely need all the words. She took her coat from the mudroom and left without the bakery container she had brought. Mark watched the door close. She's impossible lately. Nell pushed the needle through the cardigan and drew the thread until the cuff gathered. Go after her, Owen said. She'll calm down. That isn't the same? Mark stared at him. You go. Owen's face hardened with a family resemblance Nell did not often see. You're the one who hurt her. I stated a fact badly. You use facts the way Dad used fence posts. Anything can be hit with one. The comparison landed. Mark looked toward Nell as if she might defend Hank, but she kept sewing. He left without his meatloaf. Coulter rejected the counter at $465,000. Colleen persuaded him to raise his offer another $5,000. Mark refused. 2 days later, the company withdrew and bought a larger tract south of Waynesboro. Dana did not say I told you so. She sent an email containing only the withdrawal notice and the invoice for the appraisal. Nell paid half of the appraisal. When Mark forwarded a spreadsheet dividing all expenses into 4 equal shares, she returned it with a correction. I own half, she told him by telephone. I'll pay half of agreed costs. You 3 divide the other half. That comes out the same for you. I know. Then why does it matter? Because it's accurate. He made an aggravated sound. Fine. And I did not agree to the second photographer. We needed new pictures after the paint. You needed them. They benefited the property. They benefited Colleen's listing. Are we really fighting over $300? No, I'm refusing $300. Nell mailed checks directly to the appraiser and painters. She left Mark's spreadsheet unpaid. Colleen kept the listing active. The open house had produced one couple more interested in the barn than the home, and a woman named Renee Fallon, who returned alone the following Thursday. Renee was 53, newly retired from the Navy, and wanted enough acreage for 2 horses she boarded outside Norfolk. She disliked the gray kitchen. It looks like weather inside, she told Nell. Nell offered her coffee. Renee did not mind the roof estimate, and she understood old houses well enough to distrust anything described as charming. She did, however, require a dedicated water source. Her lender would accept a drilled well if money for it was held back from the sale. Mark embraced the idea he had dismissed as too expensive for the Keens. The purchase price supports it, he said. We give a $15,000 credit, and she covers anything above that. The contractor estimated 18 to 30, Nell reminded him. That estimate assumed the worst. It assumed rock. We're in Virginia. There's rock. Then why are you arguing? Mark closed his eyes. Would you be willing to let one positive thing survive a conversation? Renee made an offer on the farmhouse, barn, and 5 acres. It was lower than the Keynes' offer, but left the disputed road frontage outside the boundary. The well credit reduced the proceeds further. Dana voted to accept. Owen did too. Nell signed because the offer did not require her to maintain anything after leaving. Mark signed last. Soil testing for the well site was scheduled for the first week of March. Russell refreshed the orange flags. A well contractor marked 2 possible drilling locations behind the smokehouse, both far enough from the septic field. For the first time, the house parcel appeared capable of standing alone, though only after spending money nobody had yet spent. The weather turned warm and wet. Rain settled over the farm for 3 days, not dramatic enough for thunder, but steady enough to fill every ditch. The pasture became slick beneath its green surface. Water rose around the spring box and carried leaves against the screened intake. On the second morning, the kitchen faucet spat air. Nell waited, then tried again. A brown thread of water emerged and stopped. She pulled on boots and walked uphill beneath a raincoat. At the cedar break, the ground had slumped where the blue pipe crossed a shallow drainage channel. Water bubbled through the grass several feet below the marker stone. The line had separated at a coupling. Nell shut off the pump, returned to the house, and called Lila. By the time Lila arrived with tools, Mark had responded to Nell's message. Do not excavate until the well contractor sees current conditions. Renee's inspector is scheduled Friday. Any disturbance near water route must be documented. Nell read the message twice. Then she put the telephone in her coat pocket and took a shovel from the barn. Lila drove her utility vehicle as far as the cedar break before the tires began to slide. They carried the pipe cutter, replacement coupling, clamps, and 2 shovels the remaining distance. You tell Mark? Lila asked. Yes. He sent thoughts and prayers. He sent instructions. Cheaper. They worked in mud above their ankles. The broken line lay deeper than Nell remembered, and the trench filled with cloudy water as quickly as they cleared it. Lila knelt to bail with a feed scoop while Nell widened the downhill side. After an hour, Nell's gloves were soaked. Her lower back had begun to burn. Sit down, Lila said. In what? Fair point. They switched positions. Nell held the line steady while Lila cut away the split coupling. Rain ran from the edge of Nell's hood and struck the pipe in silver drops. An engine approached across the field. Dana's sedan stopped near the lower gate because it could go no farther. She emerged in rubber boots, holding her telephone beneath a black umbrella. Lila looked at Nell. Inspection committee? Nell drove the shovel into the mud. Dana picked her way uphill. The umbrella caught the wind and turned inside out before she reached them. She swore, folded it badly, and continued. Mark said you were digging near the proposed well site. The well site is by the smokehouse. He said the inspector needs photographs before anything changes. Dana raised the telephone. Nell looked at it, then at her. You came to photograph me? The ground, not you. For Mark, for the file. Lila stood in the trench, mud to her knees. Water's off at the house. Dana lowered the telephone. What? The line broke, Nell said. I know, but Mark said there was still water in the storage tank. There was. There isn't now. Couldn't you wait until Friday? Nell took off one glove and squeezed water from the cuff. You're welcome to use my bathroom and find out. Dana looked toward the farmhouse. Rain blurred its edges. I didn't understand it was completely off. You didn't ask. I called. You called Mark. The words struck harder than Nell intended. Dana's face changed, but she did not retreat. What do you need? She asked. We need to expose another foot of pipe. Dana looked at her cream raincoat, then at the mud. Lila handed her a shovel. For several seconds, Dana simply held it. Then she closed the broken umbrella, set her telephone beneath the utility vehicle's seat, and stepped into the trench. She was a poor digger. She lifted with her back, splashed mud onto Nell twice, and complained when water entered her right boot. Lila corrected her grip without kindness. Nell said nothing. The 3 women cleared the pipe. Lila fitted the new coupling, while Nell tightened the clamps. Dana knelt in the runoff, holding a flashlight, though it was daytime, because the shadow beneath the cedar made the work hard to see. When they switched the pump back on, the line shuddered. "Go check the kitchen," Nell said. Dana walked downhill alone. By the time she returned, mud streaked her face where she had brushed away wet hair. "It's running," she said. "Brown, then clear. That's normal after a repair." Dana looked at the exposed pipe, the tools, and Nell's trembling hands. "How often do you do this?" "Not often." "That isn't what I mean." Nell bent to collect the clamps. Her fingers would not close properly around the small metal pieces. Dana crouched and picked them up for her. "Mark told the Keens you'd keep maintaining the spring," she said. "Yes." "He didn't tell me." "He didn't tell me either." Dana placed the clamps in the toolbox one at a time. "I came to make sure you weren't sabotaging the inspection," she said. Lila stopped coiling the extension cord. Even the rain seemed to become more distinct. Nell looked at Dana's ruined coat. The water pooled inside one expensive boot, and the shame she was trying not to hide. "I know," Nell said. Dana swallowed. "I'm sorry." It was not enough to repair anything, but it was the first apology one of them had offered without immediately explaining why the wound had been reasonable. Nell nodded toward the shovel. "Rinse that before the mud dries." Dana carried it to the drainage ditch and washed it clean. Dana washed the shovel, then stood beside the ditch as if uncertain whether she had permission to come back. "You'll freeze," Nell called. "I'm already cold." "That isn't a reason to continue." Lila loaded the tools into the utility vehicle. "It is, if you enjoy pneumonia." Dana followed them downhill. Inside, she left her boots in the mudroom and stared at the water dripping from her clothes onto the floor. Her cream raincoat had become a study in brown. One sleeve was torn near the wrist. "I can't sit on anything," she said. "You can take a shower. I don't have clothes." Hank did. Dana looked toward the downstairs bedroom. "He was 6 inches taller than me. His pajama pants won't care." Nell found a flannel shirt, drawstring pants, and thick socks. Dana accepted the bundle without touching the shirt more than necessary. Lila remained long enough to drink coffee from a travel mug, then left to check a greenhouse vent before the wind worsened. While Dana showered, Nell scrubbed mud from the kitchen floor. Her hands had stopped trembling, but the ache in her back sharpened whenever she bent. She was wiping the last brown footprint when Dana emerged with wet hair, and Hank's plaid pants rolled 4 times at the ankles. "Don't laugh," Dana said. "I wasn't going to. That's worse." Nell sat down because standing had become a decision. Dana opened the refrigerator, found the soup, and poured it into a saucepan. She moved through the newly gray kitchen with the hesitancy of someone borrowing a stranger's things. "Which burner?" she asked. "Front left. They all look alike. They don't heat alike." The front left burner clicked twice before lighting. Dana watched the blue flame settle. "I remember these pants," she said. "Dad wore them every Christmas morning. He wore them most mornings by the end." Dana stirred the soup. "I didn't know that." Nell said nothing. "I know there's a lot I didn't know." "Yes. You don't make apologies easy. They're not supposed to be easy." "No, but usually people help a little." "I helped you dig." Dana gave her a tired look. "You know what I mean." The soup began to steam. Dana found bowls without asking and set one before Nell. She did not mention that the maple interior of the cabinet looked warmer than its painted doors. Her telephone rang from the mudroom. Mark's name lit the screen. Dana carried it to the table and answered on speaker. "Did she disturb the well markers?" he asked without greeting. "No." "Did you take pictures?" "Yes." Nell looked at her. Dana had photographed the broken pipe after the repair, mostly to record the coupling and exposed route. "Send them to me." "No." A pause. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I'm not sending you pictures so you can accuse her of something. I need documentation. You need to come out here once when nobody has coffee ready." Mark's voice hardened. "What happened?" The water line split. Nell and Lila were standing in a trench in the rain because there was no water in the house. "I knew the line split." "No, you knew words on a telephone." "Dana, I'm trying to protect a sale that benefits all of us. Then maybe stop protecting it from the person who lives here." He went quiet long enough for Dana to lift her spoon. "Is Nell beside you?" he asked. "Yes." "That explains this." Dana set the spoon down. "No, it doesn't." She ended the call. Nell ate 2 bites of soup before saying, "He'll think I turned you against him. He thinks disagreement is an infection." "That's from Hank." "I know." Dana stared into her bowl. "I love Dad. I know that too. He could be exhausting. Yes. They finished eating without defending him further. The well contractor returned Friday with Renee, her inspector, and a drilling consultant who carried rolled geological maps in a plastic tube. The rain had stopped, leaving the fields bright and saturated. Orange flags leaned in the mud. Renee wore rubber boots and greeted Nell with a paper bag containing biscuits. "I heard you had excitement," she said. "Water escaped. Did you catch it? Most of it." Mark watched the conversation from beside the smokehouse. Dana had sent him the repaired line photographs after all, but only once he agreed in writing that the work had been necessary and unrelated to the proposed well locations. He had replied, "Of course it was necessary," as though no other interpretation had occurred to him. The drilling consultant examined both marked sites. One offered easier access, but sat near shallow rock. The other required bringing equipment across ground that could not support a drilling rig until it dried. "Could be 3 weeks," he said. "Could be 6. Mark pointed uphill. "What about nearer the spring? You need separation from septic reserve. There's room. There's slope too." The consultant unrolled a map on the hood of his truck. None of the colors on it promised cheap water. His revised estimate was $28,000 at the low end. If the first bore failed or required steel casing through fractured rock, the cost could exceed 40. Renee folded her arms. "The credit in the contract is 15. "We can negotiate," Mark said. Her inspector looked at him. "Who pays if the well doesn't produce? It will produce. Rock doesn't read contracts." Nell glanced toward the kitchen window, where Colleen's gray paint reflected the white morning sky. Renee spent another hour walking the 5-acre boundary. The barn and enough pasture for 2 horses fit, but the most usable ground became narrow around the reserve area. She asked Russell whether the parcel could shift east. He explained that doing so brought the spring line back through it and interfered with the remaining road frontage. Every solution displaced the same difficulty without removing it. That evening, Renee requested a $30,000 seller credit and the right to cancel if the well failed to produce an adequate flow. Dana thought they should accept. Owen agreed if the appraisal supported the reduced proceeds. Mark called it an invitation to write a blank check. "It's capped at $30,000, Dana said during another speakerphone meeting. "The drilling risk isn't. She can walk away after we spend the money, then let her drill after closing. Her lender won't close without water." Nell stood at the counter slicing apples. The knife passed through soft brown spots where they had bruised in the fruit drawer. Mark turned to her. "You've been quiet." "I know. What do you think? You don't want to accept the risk, do you?" "No." His shoulders loosened, mistaking her answer for support. "I also don't expect Renee to accept it," Nell said. The tension returned. Dana rubbed her forehead. "So, what are we doing? Counter at 20, Mark said. Renee refused. Mark increased the credit to $22,000 but would not agree to drilling before closing. Renee withdrew the following Monday and purchased a smaller property with a functioning well north of Lexington. Colleen delivered the news in the gray kitchen. This time, nobody had to sign a release because the water contingency made the termination automatic. "The listing has been active long enough that buyers will ask questions," she said. "We need either a price reduction or a different product." "It's a house, not a product," Nell said. Colleen's expression softened. "To you." Mark flipped through her market report. "How much of a reduction?" "For the house parcel as currently proposed, $25,000. More if we don't solve the water before relisting." "That's ridiculous." "It's the cost buyers are assigning to uncertainty." Dana leaned against the counter in one of Nell's old aprons. She had begun coming without announcing herself, sometimes to help, and sometimes simply because her own house no longer felt like a neutral place. "What's the different product?" she asked. "The whole farm, marketed as agricultural property with a farmhouse needing renovation. The appraisal gives us a defensible price. Coulter couldn't reach it," Mark said. Coulter was a developer seeking margin. A farmer or conservation buyer might see it differently. Farmers don't have $500,000. Some do. And while we wait for this imaginary farmer, we continue paying taxes, insurance, mowing, electricity, and every repair this place invents. Nell laid down the apple knife. "You're paying 1/6. Mark looked at her. "Half is mine," she continued. "The 3 of you divide the other half. You keep describing the expenses as if they're pursuing you personally. They affect all of us. Yes. Then act like it." She wiped the blade and placed it in the drawer. I live here, I maintain it. I paid half the agreed sale costs. Which action are you missing? The action where you help us find a solution. You mean the solution you want. I mean any solution. Colleen closed her folder. I recommend everyone take 48 hours before changing the listing. Take a week, Nell said. Mark stared at her. Why? Because I'm tired of strangers measuring the house. You signed the listing. I did. I'm not withdrawing it. I'm asking for 7 days without somebody tapping my walls. Owen spoke from the telephone on the table. Give her the week. Dana nodded. Mark gathered his papers. Fine. 1 week. He left before Nell could thank him, which saved them both discomfort. The next morning, Bea arrived with 2 jigsaw puzzle boxes and a suitcase. I'm not moving in, she announced from the porch. My building is spraying for roaches. You don't have roaches? I know. That's why I'm letting them spray. Nell carried one end of the suitcase. It was unexpectedly heavy. What's in here? Necessities. Are necessities made of bricks? One puzzle is 2,000 pieces. They settled Bea in the upstairs room that had once belonged to Dana. The wallpaper was faded around the spots where framed posters had hung. Bea placed her slippers beside the bed and declared the mattress too soft, the view excellent, and the gray kitchen criminal. Lila and Cam joined them for supper that evening. Cam brought bookkeeping ledgers because she had been working late. Lila brought a chicken pie and refused credit for making it, though the initials LB were baked into the crust. Conversation moved around the failed sales without landing directly on them. Cam mentioned that their flower business needed more ground. The land they leased farther west had poor road access, and moving buckets between sites consumed fuel and time. How much ground? Nell asked. 10 acres eventually, Cam said. A barn would help. Lila looked at her. Don't start. I asked a question. You ask questions like a woman reaching for a ladder. Bea served chicken pie. What's wrong with ladders? Nell climbs them alone. I hold the bottom. That's not better. Cam opened one ledger. We can't pay development rent. We could pay agricultural lease rates, plus upkeep on fencing and part of the barn. Nell thought of Mark's spreadsheet, the appraisal, and the cost of purchasing shares she did not yet know how to purchase. Lease income would not create a fortune. It might cover taxes, insurance, and a portion of something larger. Bea watched the thought pass across her face. You own half already, she said. Half a farm is difficult to live in. So is half a marriage, Dana said from the doorway. Nobody had heard her enter. She held a bakery box in one hand and a folder in the other. Her gaze moved from Cam's ledger to the appraisal lying beneath Nell's sewing basket. What are we calculating? She asked. Nell pulled out a chair. What the place can earn, she said, if nobody tears it apart. Dana placed the bakery box on the counter and the folder beside Cam's ledger. If this is a private meeting, I can leave, she said. It became a meeting 30 seconds ago, Bea replied. Before that it was pie. Dana opened the box. Inside were 6 chocolate eclairs arranged like polished shoes. Then I brought dessert. Lila looked at the eclairs. You drive around with a bakery in your car? Some people carry pliers. Pliers don't spoil. Neither do those. I doubt they've been near cream. Nell poured Dana coffee. No one asked what was in her folder, and Dana did not volunteer it. Cam turned the ledger so everyone could see. She had written 3 figures on a yellow pad. Annual rent for 10 acres, additional rent for the barn, and the estimated value of fence maintenance Lila and Cam could perform themselves. This is not big money, Cam said. I want to be clear. It's more than the hayfield earns now, Nell said. The hay lease is practically a favor. Hank liked favors when he was receiving them. Lila cut an eclair in half. The filling remained unnaturally perfect. Cam tapped the second figure. We'd need at least a 5-year lease before investing in irrigation and cool storage. We'd carry our own insurance. Utilities would have to be separate or metered. Flowers use much water? Bea asked. Less than cattle, more than jigsaw puzzles. Depends how thirsty you get. Dana studied the numbers. This covers taxes and insurance. Most years, Nell said. Not repairs. No, not payments to us. Nell looked at her. I haven't offered payments. You put the appraisal under your sewing basket. That's where it fit. You invited a bookkeeper to dinner. Cam was already a bookkeeper when I invited her. Dana smiled, but her eyes remained alert. What are you thinking? Nell looked down at her hands. Mud remained dark beneath one thumbnail, despite 2 days of scrubbing. I'm thinking about what it would cost to buy your shares. The room became very quiet. Even Lila, who had likely guessed, stopped chewing. Dana sat back. All three? If all three would sell? At the appraised value? At the value of Hank's half in the intact farm? That's $239,000. I can divide. You can't buy our shares with division. I know what arithmetic is. B pushed the eclair plate toward Dana. Sugar makes financial disappointment friendlier. Dana ignored it. Do you have that kind of money? No. The direct answer seemed to confuse her. Nell described the idea as far as she had allowed herself to form it. She could sell Hank's truck, the stock trailer, the unused cattle equipment, and the boat if anyone could be persuaded that a hull without a motor was an opportunity. She had savings, though not enough to spend recklessly. Lila and Cam's lease could cover operating costs. Nell's pension and survivor benefits could support monthly payments if the three heirs financed the sale of their shares over 10 years. Seller financing, Cam said. Dana nodded. I know what it is. It would need proper terms. Interest, security. What happens if payments stop? I know. Nell heard tension rise between them and placed her palm on the table. Nobody is asking you to answer tonight. Dana looked toward the folder she had brought. Mark will say no. Probably. Owen might agree just to avoid a fight. That isn't enough. And you'd be paying until you're 78. If I live that long. B slapped the table lightly. You will not make your death part of the sales pitch. It affects the loan. Then put it in small print where death belongs. Dana opened her folder. It contained an offer from Carl concerning their house and the division of retirement accounts. She turned several pages face down before taking out a blank pad. What down payment? She asked. I don't know yet. How much are the equipment and truck worth? I don't know. What interest rate? I don't know. Dana stared at her. I thought of this during chicken pie, Nell said. Give me an hour. Lila laughed so hard she had to put down her eclair. They worked until nearly midnight. Nothing they calculated transformed the problem into an easy one. The farm could earn modest rent. B said she would pay rent for Hank's downstairs room if Nell ever wanted company, then became offended when Nell called that premature. My apartment costs $1,200 a month for walls thin enough to hear a stranger clip his toenails, B said. I'm not offering charity. You have a lease. It ends in August. You like town. I like sidewalks. I also like sleeping. Dana added B's possible rent in pencil, then drew a question mark beside it. She reduced every estimate Cam considered optimistic and increased each maintenance reserve. By 11:30, the numbers still required a down payment of at least $40,000 and monthly payments Nell could manage only if the barn lease began promptly and no major repair arrived with a sense of humor. The roof is already waiting, Dana said. I know. You need another $30,000 for that. I know. Where does that come from? Nell did not answer. Dana closed the ledger. Then this isn't ready? No. But it isn't impossible. Lila looked at her. Careful. Mark might hear you from here. Dana's mouth tightened. Mark hears only what disagrees with him. Nell stacked the cups beside the sink. He has reasons. So did I. You still do. Dana looked toward Hank's room. Reasons aren't permission. The next morning, Owen came to inventory the equipment. He moved through the machine shed with a flashlight, a clipboard, and the grim concentration of a man assessing his father's decline in steel. The stock trailer needed tires. The mower deck had rust around one spindle. The truck was worth more than Nell expected, but less than Mark had entered on his original estate spreadsheet. Owen opened the boat shed and stared at the dusty green hull. Where's the motor? Your father traded it. For what? A generator. Where's the generator? Earl Brooks borrowed it. Is Earl giving it back? Earl died 6 years ago. Owen lowered his clipboard. So Dad traded a motor for a generator he lent to a dead man. He wasn't dead when Hank lent it. That does improve it. They found the generator in Lila's equipment shed before lunch. She insisted Hank had given it to Earl. Nell insisted he had not. Owen wrote disputed beside both the boat and generator, then crossed it out when Lila threatened to return the generator immediately and make him load it himself. Keep it, Nell told her. The boat can become a flower bed. It already holds water, Owen said. By late afternoon, his estimate suggested the equipment sale might provide $32,000 after fees. Nell could add 12 from savings without emptying her emergency account. 44 down, Owen said. That's real. It's not much against 239. It's 18%. You sound like Mark. He isn't wrong about every number. They sat on the truck's lowered tailgate. The barn threw a long shadow across the muddy lot. Owen rubbed rust from his thumb. You should have told us you wanted the farm, he said. I didn't know. You told us nobody could close. I knew that plan wouldn't work. That isn't the same as knowing what I wanted. Did Dad want you to keep it? Nell considered the question carefully. Your father wanted not to discuss a world where he wasn't here. That sounds like him. He thought the will was fair. Was it? He left me owning what I owned and gave you what was his. That isn't an answer. It's the answer he left. Owen looked toward the house. I'd sell you my share. Don't say that to make me feel better. I'm not. I'd rather have payments than another 6 months of this. That's not a good enough reason either. Why do my reasons have to be noble? They don't. They have to survive tomorrow. He leaned back on his hands. I'll still sell. Nell touched his shoulder once, then stood. The week without showings ended. Before Colleen could relaunch the listing, Nell asked Hank's children to meet at the farm. She served no meal, food could make a demand look like hospitality, and she wanted the distinction clear. Her proposal lay in 4 copies on the table, $44,000 down. The remainder financed over 10 years at a reasonable fixed interest rate. Each heir would receive a proportionate monthly payment. Nell would assume taxes, insurance, and all repairs. The agreement would be handled properly, with the property securing the unpaid amount. Mark read the first page and laughed once, without amusement. You're serious? Yes. 10 years? Yes. You want us to become your bank? I'm asking. You want to buy us out at the whole property appraisal, after fighting every attempt to increase the value. I pointed out what the land needed. You helped kill 2 sales. Dana's chair moved sharply. No, she didn't. Mark looked at her. Excuse me? The first lender rejected your parcel. Renee rejected the well risk. Nell didn't cause either. She made sure every buyer understood the worst possible version. She told them the truth. Suddenly, you're on her side. This isn't a side. It became one when you started having secret business meetings. Nell looked at Dana. Dana did not deny telling him. Owen pushed his signed copy toward the center of the table. I accept. Mark stared at his younger brother. Of course you do. What does that mean? It means you'll agree to anything that ends a conversation. Owen's face reddened. I drove here to say it. How brave. Stop, Nell said. Mark stood and held her proposal by one corner. This is not a solution. This is you keeping everything while we wait a decade for what Dad left us. With interest, Owen said. I don't need interest. I need my property. Dana folded her copy. Your property is 1/6 of the whole. My share of Dad's half. That is 1/6. I know the math, Dana. Then stop talking like she stole the farm. Mark looked from Dana to Owen, then back to Nell. If you won't agree to market the whole property at appraisal, I'll ask a court to order the sale. The threat did not thunder. It entered the gray kitchen in his ordinary voice and sat down among them. Nell met his eyes. Then, you should learn what that costs, she said. Mark placed the proposal on the table. I already have. Mark waited for someone to ask what he had learned. Nobody did. He opened his folder and removed a single sheet. A partition action could take 8 months, maybe a year. The court would order an appraisal, then either divide the land or sell it if physical division isn't practical. The land can be divided, Owen said. The ownership can't. The house, water, and septic are exactly why. Nell looked at the paper. And the cost? Mark named a figure that made Dana sit straighter. That's if nobody fights, he added. Then why are you threatening it? She asked. Because we are stuck. We're not stuck. You received an offer. A 10-year promise from a 68-year-old woman is not the same as cash. The sentence reached the room before Mark seemed to hear it. Bea was upstairs. Lila and Cam had gone home hours earlier, but Nell imagined all of them hearing anyway. She imagined Hank too, though Hank had said worse things by accident, and then resented anyone who remembered. Owen rose. Get out. Mark turned. This isn't your house. 1/6 of it is. You just offered to sell. I haven't sold yet. Stop, Nell said. Owen did not sit. His hands were flat on the table. Mark folded the page along its existing crease. I'm talking about risk. If Nell dies before the note is paid, we're dealing with an estate, tenants, leases, repairs. There would be insurance, Dana said. the property secures the debt. And if the property declines in value, land usually doesn't evaporate. The house is trying. Nell pushed back her chair. All three looked at her. She gathered the unused copies of her proposal and squared their edges. Mark, go home. I'm not trying to insult you. You succeeded without trying. Imagine what rest will do. His face reddened. You wanted practical. This is practical. No. Practical is knowing the roof cost before promising it. Practical is locating the water before drawing boundaries. What you're doing is using my age as a bill that has come due. I didn't say that. You said 68 as if it were a defect discovered at inspection. Dana closed her eyes. Mark's anger faltered, but he did not apologize. I need an answer about listing the whole property. You have one. At an honest price, I'll consider an honest buyer. My offer to you remains open. That lets you delay until everybody gives up. Nell held his gaze. You have mistaken my patience for waiting you out. What would you call it? Living here. Mark took his coat from the mudroom. At the door, he turned toward Owen. You can pretend this is about protecting her. Eventually, somebody has to deal with the numbers. Owen pointed toward the folder. She dealt with them. You didn't like the answer. The door closed hard enough to rattle the rolled towel upstairs. Bea descended in purple slippers and Hank's old robe, which she had found on a hook. Is he gone? She asked. Dana nodded. Good. I need the bathroom, and I didn't want to pass him on the stairs with my knees out. The absurdity loosened something. Owen sat. Dana laughed once, then covered her face. Nell carried her proposal to the desk and placed it beneath the property tax bills. Don't put it away, Owen said. I know where it is. He wants you to think he's already decided. He may have. He hasn't filed anything. You don't threaten court by accident. Dana lowered her hands. Mark threatens things when he feels cornered. I didn't corner him. No? His business did. Owen looked at her. What about his business? Dana glanced toward the door. Nell returned to the table. Say it or don't. He expanded the warehouse last year, took on a line of credit when 2 commercial contracts looked certain. One got delayed, one disappeared. How do you know? Owen asked. Carl heard it from someone at a golf thing. I asked Mark. He told me it was temporary and none of my concern. Nell thought of Mark calling the surveyor before the funeral because he could not sleep. She had mistaken urgency for grief alone. How much trouble? She asked. He said he'd be fine once the estate settled. That wasn't the question. I don't know. Owen leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He spent the money before we had it. He planned for it, Dana said. There's a difference. Only if the money arrives. Nell felt no satisfaction. Mark's pressure now had a shape, but shapes could be heavier than mysteries. Bea returned from the bathroom. I heard the word business. Does that mean I missed another secret? No secret, Nell said. Only another thing nobody said until it caused damage. The attorney who had handled Hank's estate saw Nell 2 days later. Patricia Hale's office occupied the upper floor of a converted brick house near the courthouse. The waiting room held a dying fern and magazines about Virginia living in houses no ordinary Virginian could afford. Nell brought her proposal, the appraisal, Mark's expense spreadsheet, and both failed sales contracts. Patricia read without making encouraging noises. Yes, he can seek partition, she said. Any co-owner can. Would they divide the farm? Possibly, but the improvements in systems complicate an equitable physical division. A sale is more likely if nobody agrees. At auction, court-supervised sale. Sometimes open market, sometimes auction. It depends. How much would it bring? If I could answer that, I would charge more. Nell waited. Patricia took off her glasses. Forced sales rarely create the best conditions. Fees come out first. Time discourages some buyers. The developer's cash offer may be closer to the eventual net than your family wants to believe. And my half remains your half after costs. No one can erase your ownership. They can erase my home. Patricia's expression changed. Not pity, recognition. Yes, she said. Nell appreciated the honesty. They discussed her purchase proposal. Patricia found the structure reasonable, but recommended a larger repair reserve, life insurance sufficient to cover part of the note, and clearer terms for default. None of those recommendations produce money. All cost some. On the way home, Nell stopped at the bank and asked about financing. The loan officer was polite. The farmhouse's water arrangement, aging roof, and shared ownership made conventional refinancing difficult until title and systems were settled. Even with her half as equity, the bank wanted repairs completed and all sellers closing simultaneously. The house required Nell to own it before a lender would help her own it. She drove home beneath a sky the color of Colleen's cabinets. Mark's truck was parked at the barn. She found him in the machine shed, photographing the mower and stock trailer. He wore work gloves and had brought an air compressor to inflate the trailer tires. Selling things? She asked, valuing them. Owen did that. Owen guesses low, so you're guessing high. He connected the air hose. The compressor started with a metallic cough. Nell waited until it stopped. Dana told me about the warehouse. Mark's hands remained on the tire valve. Dana talks too much when she feels righteous. Is it true? It's manageable. With the farm money. With several things. What happens if the farm doesn't sell this year? It will. That wasn't the question. He removed the valve and checked the pressure gauge. I may have to sell the warehouse. Would that end the business? No. Would it hurt? Yes. The word came out raw enough that Nell did not press. Mark sat on the trailer tongue. Sawdust clung to the knees of his trousers. I had 12 employees, he said. I'm down to 7. Good people. One has been with me 14 years. Nell leaned against the mower. I thought the contracts were solid. Dad was still talking about selling the cattle then. He said the land would be worth something someday. I thought. He stopped. You thought your share was coming, she said. I thought there would be options. Hank said many things when he wanted to feel generous. Mark looked toward the farmhouse. You think I'm trying to throw you into the road to save myself? Sometimes. His face tightened. And sometimes, Nell continued, I think you're scared and making that everybody else's emergency. He stared at the pressure gauge. I can't take 10 years. Then tell me what you can take. Cash. I don't have it, exactly. The compressor restarted, filling the shed with noise. Mark bent over the tire and did not look up until it stopped again. List the whole farm for $510, he said. 90 days. If there's no acceptable offer, we discuss your financing. The appraisal is $478. People negotiate. Then list it $495, $505, $499. He almost smiled. You think people are fooled by the nines? Colleen does. They settled on $499,000 with the farmhouse, barn, spring, septic reserve, and all 34 acres kept intact. Nell's purchase proposal would remain open. Mark agreed not to file for partition during the 90-day listing. It was not peace. It was a place to stand without striking each other. Colleen returned the next afternoon. She disliked changing the campaign after marketing the smaller parcel, but conceded that the whole farm was easier to explain. Different buyers, she said. Longer exposure. We need to manage expectations. Whose? Nell asked. Everyone's. New photographs showed the complete acreage. The orange parcel flags came down. The description emphasized agricultural potential, the barn, mountain views, and a weathered farmhouse ready for restoration. Colleen did not use the word distressed. Interest arrived slowly. Several callers wanted owner financing, with almost nothing down. One asked whether the farm could become a wedding venue and lost enthusiasm at the mention of permits. A man from Maryland offered $400,000 sight unseen, then admitted his plan required an access road through Lila's adjoining pasture. The first serious showing came from a couple who raised herbs and specialty greens on leased land near Harrisonburg. They walked every field, inspected the barn roof, tested the spring flow, and asked Cam questions about local markets. Nell liked them enough to fear their offer. They returned twice. At the end of their third visit, the woman stood beside the smokehouse looking toward the farmhouse. It needs more than we can give it, she said. The couple offered $442,000, contingent on selling equipment they owned and securing an agricultural loan. It was fair enough to hurt and uncertain enough to frighten Mark. Dana wanted to counter. Owen wanted to hear them out. Mark rejected it the same evening. They're under appraisal and they can't close for months, he said. Nell looked at the offer lying between them. They understand the farm, she said. Understanding doesn't fund a sale. No? Are you asking me to accept? Nell thought of the couple standing in the pasture, speaking of soil rather than lots. She could imagine the house without her in it. She could also imagine Mark waiting for money that arrived too late. No, she said, but I'm asking you not to call it worthless because it isn't immediate. Mark picked up the offer. "I know what waiting costs," he said. He tore nothing, shouted at no one, and carefully placed the paper back in its envelope. That restraint made the distance between them feel larger. The next morning, Nell found Hank's old cap on the mudroom peg. Mark must have taken it from the bedroom drawer and returned it without a word. She held the bent bill between her fingers, trying to decide whether it was an apology, a surrender, or merely an object he had finally noticed. Then she put it on and went outside to feed the barn cat. The barn cat had no official name. Hank had called her Cat, Lila called her Margaret, and the veterinarian's invoice identified her as Gray Female Mercer. She appeared beneath the stock trailer and regarded Nell and Hank's cap with open suspicion. "It isn't him," Nell told her. The cat accepted this more quickly than the family had. Nell filled the dish near the barn door. Across the pasture, the first daffodils had begun opening along the fence where Earl Brooks's wife planted them decades earlier. Orange flags no longer interrupted the field, but small punctures remained where the survey stakes had been. The ground remembered being divided even after the lines disappeared. The herb farmers did not increase their offer. They sent Nell a polite note through Colleen, thanking her for answering their questions and wishing the farm well. Mark read the note and said, "They wanted us to feel guilty." Nell read it and thought they had simply been kind. Showings continued at a slower pace. Most people loved the view. Several loved the idea of a barn. One man loved the farmhouse until he opened the crawlspace door and saw earth beneath the floor. A woman from Washington walked through the kitchen, filming everything on her telephone, and asked whether the spring water was artisanal. "It comes out of the ground," Nell said. The woman nodded solemnly. "Exactly." She never made an offer. Spring softened the fields, raised the grass around the barn, and exposed every repair Mark had hoped a buyer would overlook. Wind tore a loose strip of metal from the barn roof. The upstairs toilet began running again. Water appeared beneath the pantry door during a southwest storm and spread across the new gray paint in a shape resembling Florida. Colleen stood over the stain with her hands on her hips. "We need to address that." "It has been addressed," Nell said. "With towels. I mean permanently, so did I." The roof estimate had risen by $4,000 since the Keynes' inspection. "Materials," the contractor explained. "Demand. The general insistence of prices on moving in only one direction." Mark suggested patching the pantry section. Owen said another patch would last until it rained intelligently. Dana asked what a full roof would do to the sale price. Colleen said it would remove an objection, but probably not return every dollar. Nobody wanted to spend $32,000 to make a house easier for someone else to own. They patched the leak. Mark began coming to the farm alone on Thursday evenings. He repaired gates, cleared dead branches, and replaced 2 rotten boards on the barn without announcing any of it. Sometimes he ate supper with Nell. Sometimes he left before she could ask. One evening, she found him scraping gray paint from the pantry door with a putty knife. "You're making it worse," she said. It bubbled. It was professionally young. He glanced at her. It had a short childhood. She handed him a wider scraper. They worked without speaking for several minutes. The old cream paint appeared beneath the gray and uneven islands. "I'm selling the warehouse," Mark said. Nell stopped scraping. "Not the business. I found a smaller place to lease." "Will the sale cover the credit line?" "Most of it." "How much is most?" "Enough that I'm not discussing the rest." She resumed scraping. "That sounds manageable." "It will be." He worked harder than the paint required. "I should have told you," he said. "Yes, I didn't want Dad knowing I'd overextended." He might have helped. He might have explained. Nell could hear Hank's voice offering guidance long after anyone needed it, and withholding it when they did. "Both," she said. Mark drew the blade carefully along the molding. He always acted like this farm proved he'd done something permanent. He was proud of it. He inherited part of it. He forgot that when telling the story. Mark smiled despite himself. He forgot many supporting characters. Nell brushed paint flakes into her palm. "You aren't a supporting character," he said. She looked at him. He kept his eyes on the door. That came out like an apology. It was near 1. "I'll work on the wording, work on the trim first." At the end of the 90-day listing period, no buyer had offered the appraised price. The highest new proposal was $450,000, contingent on selling another property and converting the barn into guest accommodations. Colleen warned that the conditions could consume months. "The market has answered," she said at the kitchen table. "Not with the answer everyone wanted, but it has answered." Mark flipped through the showing report. The appraisal was $478. Appraisals are opinions supported by data. Buyers are opinions carrying checkbooks. So, reduced to $475. We're already at $499. A $24,000 reduction won't change who can use the property. What will? $469 might attract buyers who can absorb the roof and system work. Dana exhaled, which gets us close to Coulter after commissions. Above Coulter, Colleen said. But yes, closer than Mark's parcel totals. Mark closed the report. Nell expected another argument. Instead, he looked toward the exposed cream patches on the pantry door. How long at $469? He asked. Another 60 to 90 days, realistically. And then the market answers again. He nodded slowly. After Colleen left, Nell placed a revised purchase proposal on the table. The equipment had not brought as much as Owen's first estimate. The truck sold well. The stock trailer did not. A man bought the fishing boat for $800 and appeared delighted that it lacked a motor because, he said, motors were where boats hid their expenses. After fees, Nell had $41,000 available for a down payment without touching her emergency reserve. Dana and Owen had changed the distribution. Under their version, Mark would receive $27,000 at closing. Dana and Owen would split the remaining $14,000, but their financed balances would be adjusted, so all three ultimately received equal value with interest. Mark read the page twice. "You agreed to this?" he asked them. Owen nodded. Dana said, "It doesn't cost us anything except immediate cash." "You need cash. I need my life to stop being designed around panic." "That sounds like something your therapist said." "It is. She charges enough that I'm using it." Mark looked at Owen. "And you?" "I don't need a lump sum." "You said you wanted to replace your service van." "I replaced the transmission." "That isn't the same. It moves now." Mark placed the paper down. "You're both shifting risk to yourselves, so I can get paid first." "We're shifting timing," Dana said. "For Nell, for all of us." Nell sat across from him. "You can still say no?" He looked at her. "Can I?" "Yes." "And then what?" "We reduce the listing. Or you file. Or we continue disappointing one another until the roof falls in." Owen glanced upward. "How recent is that estimate?" "Not the moment," Nell said. Mark stood and walked to the window. The hayfield had grown high enough to ripple in the wind. Lila and Cam's greenhouse frames were visible beyond the cedar break, silver arcs against the green. "You've already promised them the barn?" he asked. "No. We discussed terms. And B moves into Dad's room. If she chooses and I choose, you have it all arranged. I have possibilities." He turned from the window. "How long have you wanted this?" "The farm?" "Yes. I still don't know if want is the word." "You're going into debt until you're almost 80. "Yes. You'll spend your savings on a roof." "Probably." "You'll be tied to this place." Nell looked around the kitchen. Gray cabinets, cream scars, lemons replaced by a bowl containing actual apples. "I've been tied here for years. That's my point." "No. Your point is that I should want freedom the way you picture it. A condo near doctors. A grocery store close enough to supervise me. No field to fall in." Mark's face tightened. "We worry about you. You worry efficiently. It saves time. That's unfair?" "Sometimes." He came back to the table. "What happens when you can't manage it?" "I hire help. I lease the work. I ask before I'm in a trench." Dana looked at her. Nell met her eyes. "That last one may take practice." Dana smiled faintly. Mark tapped the proposed note. "And if the lease income falls short, I pay from my pension. If the roof takes everything, I replace the roof before I paint another cabinet." Owen laughed. Mark did not. He sat down and rubbed both hands over his face. "I thought you'd leave after Dad," he said. The words were quiet. Nell felt them enter a place the louder accusations had missed. "Why?" "Because caring for him was why you stayed." "No, it was most of your life here. It became most of it." "What else is there?" Dana said his name, but Nell lifted a hand. There was no cruelty in Mark's question now. That made it worth answering. "There's work I know how to do," she said. "There's Lila shouting from the fence, B bringing puzzles nobody asked for, the pear tree making too much fruit. There's a kitchen I dislike gray, and a bedroom I haven't decided what to do with. There's being able to look out a window without anybody else deciding what the view is worth." Mark lowered his hands. "You keep talking as though the farm is where I was trapped," she continued. "Some days it was. Some days Hank was. But he is gone, and I'm still here." That has to mean something besides, I failed to escape. Nobody moved. The kitchen pipe knocked once beneath the floor, a small hollow reminder that the spring was running. Mark picked up the pen. I want the insurance requirement Patricia recommended, he said. It's included on page 4. I want late fees after 15 days, not 30. 20, 15, 20. He looked at Dana. She negotiates everything. You taught her, Dana said. Nell did not correct that. They settled on 18 days because it was equally irritating to everyone. Mark initialed the change. Owen signed where he had signed before. Dana read every page and added a sentence requiring annual statements so no one could later claim not to understand the balance. Mark signed last. His hand paused at the end of his name. This doesn't fix everything, he said. No, Nell replied. He set down the pen. Good. The closing took 4 weeks because ordinary agreements required extraordinary quantities of paper. Insurance had to be arranged. Lila and Cam's lease needed separate terms. The equipment sale had to clear. Patricia insisted that all 3 heirs receive independent advice, which Mark considered wasteful until Dana pointed out that future peace was cheaper by the hour. On the afternoon the final documents were signed, Colleen came to remove the real estate sign. She stood in the yard holding the metal frame. I still think the kitchen photographs well. It can keep the photographs, Nell said. Colleen smiled. You were difficult to sell for. I wasn't listed. No, Colleen said. I suppose you weren't. When her car disappeared down the lane, Nell walked to the mailbox. The grass beneath the sign lay flattened and yellow, a perfect rectangle where sunlight had not reached. She expected triumph. Instead, she felt the weight of the roof, 10 years of payments, and an empty downstairs room still shaped around Hank's absence. Then the barn cat emerged from the ditch and sat squarely in the flattened grass. Nell looked at her. We own too much, she said. The cat began washing one paw. The roofers arrived before Nell had recovered from the closing. Their trucks filled the lane at 6:40 in the morning. Boots crossed the porch. Ladders struck the eaves with hollow bangs, and within an hour the farmhouse sounded as if weather had moved indoors. Nell stood in the yard, wearing Hank's cap, and watched shingles slide down blue tarps. Should have done this 10 years ago, the foreman said. I had other expenses 10 years ago. He nodded toward the roof. It waited, not politely. The new roof cost $31,600. Nell paid $6,000 from savings and borrowed the rest against the property she had just gone into debt to own. The loan officer, who had been cautious before closing, became friendlier once one name appeared on the title and the farm remained intact around the water and septic systems. The approval did not feel like victory. It felt like being permitted to purchase a very expensive umbrella. When the crew exposed rotten decking above the pantry, the foreman came down to show her photographs. Water had traveled farther than the ceiling stains suggested. How much? Nell asked. He told her. She sat on the porch step. You all right? He asked. I'm deciding whether I need the part of the roof above the pantry. He waited, unsure whether older widows commonly deleted rooms during repairs. Fix it, she said. The final bill added $2,300. Nell created a notebook for debts. The family note received a blue tab. The roof loan received red. Insurance, taxes, and maintenance had green. She disliked that the green section, the color of growing things, contained only bills. Cam admired the system. You're tracking principal and interest separately? I'm old, not vague. I never said old. Everyone says organized when they mean old, but still useful. Cam grinned. Can I steal this layout? For a percentage. Lila and Cam signed their lease in June. Their 10 acres included the barn, a strip of pasture with good southern exposure, and access to the farm lane. They agreed to maintain fencing, carry insurance, and contribute to repairs caused by their use. Nell agreed not to wander into their work areas and rearrange things without asking. Lila had requested that clause by name. You moved 3 flats of seedlings, she said. They were in the wind. They were hardening. They looked cold. They were plants. Plants get cold. Cam added the clause while they argued. The barn changed first. Old feed bins came out. Lila pressure washed the concrete without carving accidental stripes into it. Cam hung a whiteboard where Hank had once recorded cattle weights in pencil. Buckets appeared in orderly stacks, followed by coils of drip line, rolls of netting, and a second-hand cooler that hummed loudly enough to be heard from the smokehouse. Nell missed the barn's smell before she realized she had stopped smelling it years ago. She did not miss the manure. Bee's apartment lease ended in August. She arrived with 2 movers, the yellow sofa, 17 frame photographs, 4 boxes labeled "Kitchen Important," and 11 boxes labeled "Puzzles." "You said necessities," Nell told her. "They remain necessary. The sofa won't fit." It fit in the apartment. The apartment had a wider door. Bee measured the mudroom entrance with the cardboard ruler supplied by the moving company. "Take the door off. The sofa is yellow. You knew that." I didn't know how much of it there was. The sofa did not fit through the mudroom, the front door, or either downstairs window. It remained on the porch while Bee moved into Hank's room. Nell had delayed clearing it. The recliner still sat near the window beneath the clean quilt. A faint circle marked the floor where the oxygen machine had stood. Hank's slippers remained underneath the bed, one upright and one on its side, waiting with more patience than he had ever possessed. Bee entered carrying a box of photographs. She set it down and looked around. "We can wait," she said. "No, you don't have to prove anything. I need the room. You have 4 bedrooms. I need this one to be a room." Bee sat on the edge of the bed. "Then tell me what goes." The slippers went into a donation bag. Nell held the upright one long enough for Bee to look away. Owen took the recliner. He said the chair would be useful in the break room at work, where technicians ate lunch beside boxes of furnace filters. Nell suspected he wanted one thing that still carried the shape of his father, but she respected the disguise. They rolled up the rug and found the floorboards beneath it lighter, except for the grooves made by the oxygen machine. Nell knelt and ran her fingers across them. "Sand those?" Owen asked. "No, you sure? They're part of the floor now." The bed moved to the opposite wall. Bee hung Ray's photographs beside the window and placed a purple lamp on Hank's dresser. The room did not become hers immediately, but it stopped being only his. The yellow sofa became a porch sofa after the movers removed its legs and pushed it through the porch railing. Bee covered it with outdoor fabric and declared the arrangement intentional. "It's the brightest thing on the farm," Lila said. "It discourages aircraft from landing," Nell replied. "Jealousy is ugly," Bee said. "So is the sofa." They sat on it most evenings. Owen came every other weekend to rebuild the porch steps. The work required 2 weekends more than he predicted because the stringers were rotten beneath the bottom tread. On the 3rd Saturday, he removed the last warped board and found the cast iron skillet Hank used for cornbread resting upside down in the crawl space. Except it was not the skillet. It was a rusted hubcap. "Where's the big skillet?" Nell asked. Owen wiped dirt from the hubcap. "What skillet?" "The one that hung by the stove. Maybe Dana took it." Dana had not. She remembered Mark carrying a box of kitchen things after the funeral. "He said they were Dad's," she told Nell. "They were in my kitchen." I didn't say he was right. Nell looked at the empty hook beside the stove. The skillet had been Hank's mother's before Hank, and Nell had baked cornbread in it more often than either of them. She had not noticed its absence because the cabinets, boxes, showings, and repairs had made everything feel temporarily misplaced. "Ask him for it," Dana said. "If he wanted me to have it, he'd return it. Maybe he thinks it's his. Then the pan has chosen." Dana rolled her eyes. "You both turn objects into arguments because actual conversation requires scheduling." "Did your therapist say that?" "No. She charges extra for family members." Dana's divorce settlement arrived in late summer. She accepted less for the house than she believed her contribution deserved, but more than Carl's first offer. She moved into a small rental with white walls she was not allowed to paint. She began visiting Nell on Wednesday afternoons. Sometimes she brought groceries. Sometimes she came empty-handed and sat on the porch sofa, complaining about its color. One Wednesday, she carried the gray paint samples to the barn. "Bonfire?" Lila asked. "No public destruction," Nell said. "Trash." They kept the cabinets gray because stripping them would damage the maple, and repainting them would cost money better spent elsewhere. Dana chose a warm cream for the walls and painted over Whispering Ash herself. The job took 2 days. She got paint in her hair, missed a strip above the refrigerator, and left one gray square behind the pantry door. "You missed a spot," Nell said. "I preserved the buyer's future." They laughed until Dana had to sit down. Later, while washing brushes at the outdoor spigot, Dana said, "I'm sorry about the condo." Nell looked up from squeezing water out of a roller. "The way I talked as if your life was a problem to relocate," Dana continued. "I thought I was helping. You were helping yourself not worry. Yes, that's common. It still wasn't fair. No. Dana waited, perhaps hoping for forgiveness in a recognizable form. Nell handed her the clean roller. Put that in the sun. It was not absolution, but Dana understood it as an invitation to return. Mark did not. His monthly payment confirmations arrived by email. Received, thank you. He sold the warehouse and moved his business into a leased building. Owen reported that the company had kept all 7 employees. Dana said Mark was embarrassed by how close he had come to losing it. Nell said embarrassment was a private climate and Mark could dress for it himself. She mailed his first interest statement on time. No birthday passed, no holiday offered an excuse. Mark simply remained absent from the farmhouse while his money arrived each month. Nell missed him most when something required annoyance. Owen helped cheerfully. Dana argued but eventually listened. Mark could make replacing a gate hinge feel like a trial of national importance. The silence where his resistance belonged was more unsettling than peace. By September, Lila and Cam's first large flower harvest filled the barn with color. Colossia glowed red and orange in buckets. White snapdragons stood along the cooler wall. Rows of dahlias turned the old cattle aisle into something extravagant. Cam secured restaurant and florist orders. Lila hired 2 adult seasonal workers and pretended she had not. The lease payment arrived 3 days early. Nell entered it under green. B suggested a harvest supper. For what? Nell asked. For surviving the roof. That was months ago. Then for flowers. We didn't grow them. For owning the dirt beneath the flowers. That sounds like landlord behavior. B spread her hands. For Tuesday, Nell. People eat on Tuesday. They chose the first Saturday in October. Lila supplied tables from the barn. Cam strung lights beneath the porch roof. Owen promised to bring folding chairs. Dana volunteered dessert and was forbidden from purchasing eclairs. Nell wrote invitations on plain cream cards. Lila and Cam, Owen, Dana, Claire, who declined because of a wedding but sent a bottle of wine. Patricia Hale, the roof foreman, who said roofers were rarely invited back unless something leaked. She wrote Mark's name last. No speech, no demand for apology. Supper at 6. Come if you want. She mailed it before she could improve the wording. The afternoon of the supper, the farmhouse smelled of roast chicken, apples, and cornbread, baked in a borrowed skillet. B arranged dahlias in jars. Dana arrived carrying 2 pies she claimed to have made, and refused to answer questions about the bakery labels in the trash. At 5:40, Owen set the final chair beneath the maple. He answer? He asked. No? You think he'll come? Nell adjusted a fork that did not require adjustment. I think food gets cold whether people deserve it or not. Cars began arriving. Lila crossed the pasture on foot. Cam came from the barn with flowers under one arm. Voices filled the porch and spilled into the yard. At 6:10, B touched Nell's shoulder. A truck had turned into the lane. Nell knew the engine before she saw the driver. The truck slowed beside the mailbox, then continued up the lane as if the driver had nearly changed his mind and disliked himself for it. Mark parked behind Owen's van. For several seconds he remained behind the wheel. Nobody on the porch pretended not to watch. Lila took a sip of iced tea. Want us to hide? That would be subtle, Nell said. We could all look at the flowers. Please don't. Mark opened the truck door. He wore a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. In both hands, he carried a brown paper grocery bag. The round weight at the bottom pulled the paper tight. Nell knew what was inside before he reached the porch. Mark stopped at the lowest new step. Owen held a stack of napkins against his chest. Dana stood beside the door with pie filling on one finger. Cam found something urgent to adjust in a vase. B remained exactly where she was, having never once believed discomfort improved when ignored. Mark looked at Nell. Your invitation said 6. It did. It's 6:10. Also true, I almost went home. Would have saved you explaining the bag. He glanced down at it. Can I come up? Nell stepped aside. The porch boards held beneath him. Owen had rebuilt the steps properly, though he still intended to add a second handrail, once Nell stopped arguing that one rail was enough for any sensible person. Mark set the bag on the table and removed the cast iron skillet. It had been scrubbed and re-seasoned. The black surface shone with oil. A square of folded newspaper protected the table beneath it. I took this after the funeral, he said. I noticed in August. You noticed late? There were distractions. I thought it was Dad's. It was your grandmother's. That's what I meant. No, it isn't. Mark nodded. No. He lifted the lid of a plastic carrier balanced inside the skillet. Beneath it sat a round of cornbread, darker at one edge and sunken in the middle. I tried to make something in it, he said. The first one stuck. This is the second? The third. Dana inspected the cornbread. What happened to the middle? It became discouraged. Owen put the napkins down. Did you use baking powder? I followed the recipe. That isn't an answer. It was in the cabinet. How old? Mark's expression answered. Lila broke off one corner before anyone could stop her. She chewed thoughtfully. Well, Mark asked. It's food. That bad? It depends how much butter we have. The tension cracked just enough for people to move again. Cam carried the skillet into the kitchen. Dana fetched butter. Owen asked Mark whether he needed help bringing anything else from the truck. There isn't anything else, Mark said. Nell watched him look around the porch. He noticed the yellow sofa, the repaired roof above it, the string of lights, and the tables running beneath the maple. His gaze paused on the barn aisle, glowing with flowers. It looks different, he said. It is. The siding doesn't. No. You going to paint it? Someday. That means no. That means it isn't leaking. B handed him a glass of tea. Drink. You look like a man entering a dentist's office. I feel like one. No anesthetic here. So I've heard. Mark accepted the glass. The first awkward minutes did not vanish simply because he had brought back a pan. He stood near Owen instead of choosing a seat. Dana spoke to Cam with exaggerated attention. Lila ate another corner of cornbread, as if evaluating structural integrity. Nell returned to the kitchen for the roast chicken. Mark followed. She heard him enter but did not turn. She was spooning apples around the bird, trying to decide whether the platter was too heavy to carry alone. I've got it, he said. So does the table. He placed his hands in his pockets. Can we talk before everybody eats? We're already 10 minutes late. I know. That seems important to you tonight. It's easier to apologize to someone who's irritated. Nell set down the spoon. The kitchen walls glowed warm cream beneath the lights. Dana's mist strip remained above the refrigerator. The gray square behind the pantry door was visible because the door stood open. Mark noticed the cabinets. You kept the paint. It cost $1,800. I paid part of that. 1/6. He gave a small, deserved smile. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, Lila said something that made B laugh too loudly. They were granting privacy without attempting invisibility. Mark looked at the skillet on the counter. I should have returned it before now. Yes, I kept thinking I needed to say the right thing when I did. You could have mailed it. It weighs 12 pounds. That isn't prohibitive, I know. He rubbed one thumb along the side of his glass. When I took it, I was angry. At me, at everything. Dad dying, the farm, the will, the warehouse. You sitting here like you knew what would happen. I did know. That made it worse. Nell waited. He looked toward the window above the sink. In the dark glass, the porch lights floated over reflections of people moving behind them. I thought you wanted the sales to fail, he said. Part of me still thinks you didn't mind. I didn't mind being proved right. I know. I minded Paul and Marjorie losing the house. That surprised me. It surprised me too. He nodded. I offered them your labor. Yes, I didn't even think of it that way. The pump worked because you knew how to fix it, so in my head, that was just another feature of the property. A widow included with the spring. His face tightened. That sounds awful? It was. I'm sorry. Nell moved the carving knife an inch away from the edge of the counter. Mark continued before she could answer. I kept adding up what Dad left us. Land, equipment, percentages. I didn't add what you spent keeping him here. I don't only mean money. That's fortunate. You couldn't afford the money either. He almost smiled, then stopped himself. I think I treated care like it didn't count because nobody invoiced us. The sentence was plain. No defense followed it. Nell looked at him. Mark's eyes had gone red around the edges. He did not wipe them or turn away. That, more than tears would have, reminded her how hard this was for him. You knew he was sick, she said. I knew the diagnosis. You knew I was tired. I knew you said you were tired. That isn't the same. No. You visited for 2 hours and asked what needed doing. If I told you, you did it. If I said nothing, you drank coffee and went home relieved. His jaw shifted. I thought you'd tell me. You wanted instructions because instructions end. He closed his eyes once. Yes. And, after he died, you did the same thing. You came with a folder, so grief would have tasks. Yes? Nell picked up the spoon again, though there was nothing left to arrange. I was angry too, she said. Sometimes I answered you in the way most likely to make you feel stupid. You were very good at it. I've had practice. Dad? Mostly. Mark looked at the cream wall. I'm not asking you to say none of it mattered. Good. I don't know what I'm asking. Nell slid the platter toward him. Start with carrying that. He lifted it, and after supper, she said, You can wash dishes. That's my sentence? It's an opening. He looked at her over the roast chicken. Am I staying then? You came for supper. It was not forgiveness as Mark might have imagined it during the drive. It did not turn the previous year into a misunderstanding. It gave him a chair and a job, which was more useful. They carried the food outside. Mark sat between Lila and Dana, possibly the most dangerous location at the table. Owen offered a brief blessing that thanked God for the meal, the roof, the farm, and everyone who had arrived by any route. When he finished, B said he had omitted the yellow sofa. It's covered by mercy, Cam replied. Plates passed from hand to hand. The chicken was tender. Dana's pies were suspiciously perfect. Mark's cornbread required butter, but less than Lila predicted. Conversation found safer ground at first. Cam described a restaurant owner who wanted every flower to appear naturally wild, but identical in height. Owen told them about a furnace repaired temporarily with a dinner fork. B objected to the waste of a useful fork. Mark asked Lila about the flower lease. She pays you to make the barn look like that, he said to Nell. Cam pays, Lila said. I suffer administration. Cam pointed her fork at her. Administration got you 3 standing orders. Flowers grew them. Flowers don't send invoices. The word changed something at the table. Mark's eyes met Nell's briefly. Neither looked away. Lila reached for potatoes. You ever reset the spring pump? Mark cleared his throat. No. February's educational. I've been told. By whom? Everyone, eventually. That's how families work, Bay said. They tell you the same thing in different ways until you either learn or stop visiting. Dana looked at her. Is that on a pillow somewhere? It should be. As darkness settled, the string lights reflected in the windows. The weathered siding disappeared beyond their glow, leaving only the porch and the voices beneath it. From the barn came the low hum of the flower cooler. The maple dropped one yellow leaf into Mark's tea. He removed it and placed it beside his plate. Nell had imagined this table for months without understanding that ownership would not determine who sat there. The deed had settled what the farm owed Hank's children. It had not settled what any of them owed one another. There were no speeches. Patricia Hale told a story about a client who attempted to divide a lake vertically. Owen laughed hard enough to choke. Dana accused Mark of ruining the green shutter by leaving it in the shed too long before hanging it. Mark blamed wood swelling, humidity, and history in that order. It's crooked, Dana said. It closes. It's a shutter. Its job is to look straight. You sound like Colleen. Dana gasped. Take that back. Nell ate a second helping of apples. After dessert, Lila and Cam carried flower buckets to the barn. Patricia left before the lane became difficult to see. Owen folded chairs. Dana wrapped leftover pie in foil and tried to send it home with everyone who owned a vehicle. Mark began washing dishes. He removed his watch, rolled his sleeves higher, and filled the sink. Nell stood beside him with a towel. You don't have to supervise, he said. I live here. That isn't an answer. It was yours. He handed her a plate. Dana entered with a stack from the porch. Scrape those first. The drain is old. I know how to wash dishes, Mark said. You knew how to sell a farm too. Dana, Nell said. Dana pressed her lips together. Too soon? Yes. Fair. She scraped the plates. Owen took dry dishes to the cabinets but opened the wrong door 3 times. You all grew up here, Nell said. How do none of you know where anything goes? You rearranged, Mark replied. Once. In 2004. I knew where things were before that. You were 30. Old habits, lazy memory. Their talk was easy until it wasn't, then easy again. That seemed more trustworthy than sudden harmony. When the last guests had gone, Mark carried the skillet to its old hook beside the stove. He held it there, waiting. Nell nodded. The iron settled against the wall with a heavy, familiar sound. I can come Saturday and straighten the shutter, he said. It's been crooked for years. I know. You don't need to invent repairs to visit. He looked toward the mudroom. Hank's cap hung on its peg again. Nell had worn it to the barn that morning and returned it without thinking. All right, Mark said. Can I come Saturday without repairing anything? The lower gate drags. That sounds like a repair. It's also where coffee is. He smiled. 9:30. I'll be here at 9. Then you can wait outside. At the door he paused. The first payment helped. With the warehouse? Yes. I still had to sell. I know. The smaller place is better in some ways. Worse in others? Of course. Nell nodded. That was the kind of truth she trusted now. Mark kissed her cheek. He had not done so since the funeral. The gesture was brief and awkward, his face rough with evening stubble. Good night, Mom, he said. The words stayed behind after the door closed. Nell stood in the mudroom until his truck reached the road. She did not turn the moment into more than it was. He had returned a skillet, washed dishes, and promised coffee. The family note still had 9 years and 10 months remaining. The roof loan had longer. Dana would still arrive with an agenda some Wednesdays. Owen would still mistake avoiding conflict for kindness. Mark would still reach for command whenever fear found him first. The farmhouse was not saved in the way strangers used that word. It remained expensive, weathered, and dependent on ground that could not be neatly separated from it. Its spring would fail again someday. The pantry door would swell. Winter would find the weak places. Nell switched off the porch lights, leaving the barn's glow across the pasture. Bee called from Hank's old room. Did he eat the last cornbread? There's half a piece. Hide it from the cat. Margaret has standards. The floor creaked beneath Nell as she crossed the kitchen. Above the counter, the cast iron skillet hung where it belonged, not because Hank had owned it, or Mark had claimed it, or Nell had won it back, but because someone had finally carried it home and asked where it should go. Beneath the floor, the pipes gave one hollow knock. From the hallway, Bee called. What was that? The house, Nell said. What does it want? Nell looked through the dark window at the barn, the fields, and the porch chairs waiting to be folded in the morning. Nothing, she said. It's just letting us know it's here.